Hey guys, tonight we're not sailing with pirates. No sunburnt bandits, no rotten rainwater soup, no splintery death traps floating on questionable oceans. Nope. Tonight, we're trudging into something arguably worse. The cold, unsanitary, relentlessly uncomfortable daily life of Colonial America. A world where everything smelled strange, everything felt damp, and people worked so hard they probably fell asleep mid-sentence. But before we shiver our way into the past, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. If Colonial America didn't need indoor plumbing, I don't need forced engagement. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, it's always 2 a.m. somewhere. And honestly, thinking about chamber pots, ice-cold bedrooms, and bathing once every never is exactly the kind of content people absorb at 2 a.m. Now dim those lights. Turn on a fan for a soft white noise breeze. Don't worry, this wind won't give you pneumonia. Get comfortable. Tuck your feet in. Not because imaginary rats might nibble your toes, but because Colonial America definitely had real ones. Everywhere. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what everyday life in the 1600s and 1700s actually felt like? Not the polished history book version, not the reenactment village where actors secretly have smartphones in their pockets, but the real thing. Waking up in a freezing house, shivering into itchy clothes, stepping outside into mud so deep it could emotionally damage you, and spending your entire day trying to avoid starvation, disease, or your neighbor's overly enthusiastic livestock. Did people really only bathe a few times a year? Did everything truly smell like smoke, sweat, wet wool, and mild despair? How did anyone survive long winters with nothing but a fireplace, drafty walls, and soup that probably tasted like disappointment? Tonight, we're wandering slowly through that world, not to gross you out. Okay, maybe a little, but to explore the strange mix of hardship, humor, resilience, and please don't let me die this winter, energy that shaped early American life. Imagine families huddled together under one blanket because the house was colder inside than it was outside. Food that had two settings, burned or still alive. Toilets that were basically buckets with ambition. And chores that required more muscles than most people possess today. But we're not rushing. We're drifting through the past gently, like watching snow fall outside a creaky wooden cabin. Tonight isn't about drama or danger. It's about discovering the mildly hilarious, mildly horrifying realities of survival before electricity, medicine, insulation, or deodorant became normal. So settle in. Let the modern comforts around you, the warmth, the blankets, the actual plumbing, remind you that no matter how chaotic your day was, at least you don't live in Colonial America. Let your imagination walk through smoky kitchens, muddy paths, crowded taverns, and cold bedrooms, while your real body melts deeper into comfort. Ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. Waking in a Colonial Cabin. Morning arrives slowly in the dim interior of an early 18th century cabin, not with bright sunshine or cheerful birdsong, but with a muted, grayish light that seeps through gaps in the wooden walls. The day does not so much begin here as it simply stirs awake, blinking groggily into existence. Long before warmth or comfort touches the room, the first sensation to greet a waking body is the smell. The thick, heavy aroma of a life built from necessity, not luxury. The air is dense with wood smoke that has settled into every board, every blanket, every strand of hair. It lingers from the modest fire smoldering in the corner, a fire that never fully dies because the cabin's inhabitants cannot afford it to. The smoke clings to the rafters, curling up into the ceiling and hanging there like a low, gray fog. It is both familiar and inescapable, the scent that defines mornings, evenings, and everything in between. Mixed with the smoke is another layer of aroma, one even more unmistakably human: the musk of unwashed bodies. Bathing is a rare event, saved for special occasions or warmer seasons when water isn't a threat to survival. Clothing, thick and woolen, absorbs the odors of sweat and long days of labor. In the cramped quarters of a single-room cabin, the smell wraps itself around the waking figure like a coarse, invisible blanket. It is unpleasant by modern standards, but in colonial America, it is simply life, expected, accepted, and unnoticed after a while. And then, woven through the smoky, human scent is yet another presence: livestock. Just outside the thin cabin walls, or sometimes inside during cold nights, animals shift, snort, and stir. Chickens scratching at the dirt, a cow shifting weight on cold ground, maybe a pig or two grumbling softly as dawn approaches. Their earthy smell seeps into the cabin easily, drifting inside with every breeze that slips through the cracks. For a colonial family, animals are not faraway farm creatures. They are companions of survival, so close that their scents become part of the morning itself. The room is dim, lit only by that faint, uncertain light filtering through small, greased paper windows. Shadows spill across the rough-hewn floorboards, drawing long, uneven lines that make the cabin feel even narrower than it is. A simple straw mattress rustles as the waking figure shifts, brushing away bits of hay that poke through the thin fabric. Wool blankets, patched and worn, fall away slowly, releasing whatever warmth the night managed to gather. Cold air quickly claims the body. It nips at fingers, toes, and the tip of the nose. Breath rises in soft, white clouds that linger momentarily before fading into the smoky haze above. Winter mornings in the colonies are not gentle. They press against skin, urging families to rise quickly not because they want to, but because chores will not wait. A small iron pot sits near the fire, waiting to be reheated.
Perhaps it holds yesterday's porridge, thickened overnight, now stiff and unwelcoming. But it is breakfast, or something like it. Every task, from eating to tending the animals to chopping wood, must begin in this dimness, before the sun climbs fully over the horizon. Despite the harshness, there is a rhythm to the scene, a predictable cadence that colonial families knew intimately. Waking to smoke, musk, and livestock was not a surprise. It was routine. Stability in its own rugged form. And so, with a deep breath of that pungent, layered air, the new day begins. Not comfortably, not cleanly, but with a steady resilience that defined life in colonial America. Chapter 2: The Ruffling of Musket Feathers. Drilling with the Neighbors. Hey guys! Tonight, we're turning our gaze to an era that somehow managed to combine muskets, mustaches, and a good old-fashioned medley of chaos, right in the heart of colonial America. Yes, we're diving into the 1700s, where liberty and daily life jostled for attention on the village green, like a chicken trying to cross the road while dodging an overzealous British redcoat. Now, before we plunge into a world where the closest thing to a spa day involved a bucket of cold water and a prayer to the soap gods, let's consider a few absurd questions. Ever wondered how musket training felt like a PTA meeting when everyone had left their dramatic tendencies at home? Or how the sound of a musket firing could be both invigorating and mildly terrifying, like your toddler deciding to experiment with a kazoo? And what's the deal with drill sergeants in the 1700s? Did they really yell to inspire courage, or were they just engaged in an oddly competitive shouting match? So, pull on your imaginary tri-corner hat and prepare for a delightful snooze beneath those cozy blankets. Imagine yourself on a clear day, the sun warming your humble settler's face as you feel the rugged, coarse fabric of your homespun trousers. Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1735, a year where the rustic charm of colonial life is about to be punctured by the fervent enthusiasm of local militia drills. Let's talk about drilling practice, shall we? You step onto the village green, where farmers and craftsmen bedecked in their best plain clothes, think the Not Quite Sunday Best ensemble, are busily trying to conduct military formations. Imagine them clustering together, like a slightly confused flock of sheep trying not to trip over their own hooves. These settlers, having exchanged their farming tools for muskets, attempt to look fierce while clearly still smelling faintly of hay. The grass beneath your feet threatens to tickle your ankles, making you feel strangely vulnerable, like you're wearing socks with sandals at a trendy coffee shop. The sound of boots stomping on the earth reverberates like a trembling banjo, offering an oddly musical backdrop to this display of rugged resolve. Yet, despite their noble intentions, it's not long before chaos reigns supreme. "Fire in the hole!" shouts a neighbor, with a fervor that suggests either extreme bravery or a complete disregard for danger. The musket fires off a shot with a bang so loud it could wake the spirits of all the bemused ancestors watching the spectacle from the great beyond. And speaking of spirits, imagine the number of ghostly eyebrow raises happening nearby, all wondering if this performance ought to come with a side of popcorn. But let's reflect on the sheer absurdity of these drills. These men weren't just practicing military maneuvers. They were also trying to get their heads around the fact that
they'd traded in plowing fields for learning how to fire a musket, an alarming upgrade from Just Shoot Me starring Farmer Joe. An entire afternoon focused on drilling, only to discover that in the heat of battle, they might still forget left from right, eliciting all sorts of comedic mishaps. The cadence of the drill is another spectacle. The sergeant calls out commands with an exaggerated flourish, as if trying out for a Broadway musical. "Left face! Right face! Forward, march!" Each instruction seems to spur the participants to new heights of ridiculousness. It's like watching your uncle during a family reunion, enthusiastic but bewilderingly out of rhythm. Imagine trying to maintain formations while simultaneously pressing down the urge to break into a jig every time a new 2, 3, 4 hits the air. You can almost feel the confrontation between the farmer's instincts and this oddly new militaristic ambition. After all, they were more used to haggling at the market than taking orders like stressed-out office workers trying to recall how to fax something. You'd hear interactions like, "Wait a minute, I thought about face meant I should grab more ale for the water break." And inevitably, a misunderstanding transforms into an unplanned marching band performance, sans instruments, at the nearest tavern. And let's not forget about the muskets. Hold your breath. It's said that loading these beasts was almost as complicated as putting together an IKEA dresser without the instructions. Teams fumble with gunpowder, the delicate art of managing a flintlock, and trying not to look like they've just stumbled out of the local barn. The smell of gunpowder hangs in the air, mixing with the earthy scent of the grass, and somehow smells both intimidating and slightly like burnt toast. Yes, toast. Because with all that time spent absently waving their muskets around, someone inevitably decides that a lunch break might be a wise choice. And what about the ladies? While their brave partners are wrestling with muskets, the women of the colony are nearby casting judgment sharper than the blades of the emergency vegetable slicer they've been eyeing for years. Could they possibly shout out advice too? "Honey, if you swing that musket any lower, you might chop the chicken's head clean off." While they're not privy to the fireworks and chaos, they surely find well-placed humor in watching their husbands navigate the grand drama of turning from farmer to sophisticated martial artist. As the drill reaches its climax, the mix of hilarity and panic culminates in one brave lad tripping over his own feet and dropping his musket. Cue a volley of snickers from nearby onlookers. After all, it should be noted that beneath the impending conflict looming on the horizon, there lies this delightful undercurrent of human silliness. Who knew the struggle for liberty would also require learning how to tango awkwardly
with loaded firearms? As the day draws to a close and you find yourself reflecting beneath the colorful beams of a setting sun, it's worth remembering that no matter how hopelessly uncoordinated this ragtag crew of farmers seemed, they were united by a singular purpose: to secure a future that didn't involve simply tending to crops and hanging out at the local tavern. So, tuck in tightly, dream of musket drills, and know it's okay to be a little awkward sometimes, because even amidst colonial chaos, laughter can echo louder than gunshots. Good night, O brave insurgents of liberty. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be filled with unwieldy mustaches and slightly melodramatic skirmishes that would make even the most skilled soldiers raise an eyebrow. Chapter 3. The Comfort of Straw and Regret. Welcome back, dear listener. As we continue our sleepy exploration into colonial America, let's discuss something that's about as comfortable as a hug from a cactus: your bed. Picture it, if you will. This is not the plush sanctuary of memory foam and luxurious pillows, a la modern day. No. Tonight's discomfort is brought to you by the fine craftsmanship of a rough wooden bed frame that looks like it was designed by a committee of angry beavers. Imagine lying upon a mattress that is less a sumptuous cocoon and more a thin slab of life's regrets, hastily stuffed with dry straw and corn husks. Yes, corn husks, because nothing says comfort like being poked by something that was once a snack for a chicken. The mattress sags in the middle, as if it simply had enough of life itself, almost welcoming you to nestle into a comforting embrace of swirling dust and tiny, muffled screams from trapped insects. The moment your head hits the pillow, which is essentially another lump of rough fabric filled with more straw, because why would anyone consider soft goose down? You are treated to a delightful mixing of smells that could only be described as aged livestock and the faint, lingering aroma of yesterday's supper. There's something oddly poetic about it, really, akin to romanticizing your grandfather's pasta sauce, which actually might have been last Tuesday's leftovers, and hoping for the best as it sits unceremoniously in the back of the fridge, defeating the laws of nature. As you drift into this whimsical world of colonial indulgence, if you can manage to close your eyes against the unending itch of whatever's crawling around in the straw, you may wonder, is this really how people lived? Can I still be unbothered by the fact that I'm sleeping on something that looks suspiciously like a farm accident? Well, my friend, you fit right in. The bed frame's sagging ropes are a metaphor for life itself, always inviting you to ponder the existential crisis of having chosen a mattress that's essentially a glorified sports field with none of the joy and all of the soreness. Isn't it lovely? Much like ruminating over your life choices while lying awake at 2 a.m., wondering if you'll ever amount to more than a mere pile of corn husks? In the early 1700s, you were a champion of discomfort, sleeping side by side with your entire family, or all of the local wildlife, depending on how ambitious the night turned out. Did you ever think about those medieval times when family togetherness didn't mean Netflix and pizza, but instead a lively night filled with communal complaining about the cold room and the odd rustling sound that might or might not be a raccoon? Survival meant snuggling up like sardines in a rusty can, not for warmth, but because personal space was a luxury you could never afford. Now, let's talk about getting out of bed. Exciting. Do you ever wake up feeling like a champion, ready to conquer the day? Or, more accurately, do you wake up floating through the bitter ether of, am I really awake? As you bump your knee against the hard wooden leg of the bed frame, which, surprise, surprise, seems to have grown overnight like some mythical beast, simply for revenge. Because let's be honest, that's the true conflict here. You throw back your straw-filled blanket, which is probably less cozy duvet and more convenient excuse to not get out of bed, and stumble into a world that desperately wishes it could convince you of its charms. Slip on your sandals, or whatever form of footwear passes for your own creativity, and just wait. Because the wooden floor, cobblestones, or sometimes dirt, what's the difference really? isn't exactly an invitation to a summer dance. But you move forward, step after step, your feet encountering dampness, dust, and who knows what else, as every inch of your being yearns for the smooth, level ground of a wellness retreat circa today. Did the pioneers ever contemplate their choices, pondering if relentless rigor mortis would have been a kinder fate than this? Drudging forward to the day's tasks, you can't help but muse about how good morning is a conspiracy. Wouldn't it be better to say, "Welcome to your daily nightmare. Please enjoy the scent of yesterday's corn and consider your life decisions over a cup of something vaguely resembling coffee that's actually just hot, dark water. Cheers!" And as you survey the morning light streaming in through the tiny window, if you even have one, remember that this was simply life's soundtrack in Colonial America. A series of odd smells, uncomfortable textures, and perhaps, just perhaps, a touch too much corn. So here you lie, yourself and your bed, wrestling in a dance of irritation, straws stabbing you at weird angles, and even the occasional flea nobly bringing you back to reality. You see, life in the early 1700s was a mosaic of minor discomforts, stitched together with humor and a dash of misery, reminding you that sometimes the best punchline comes from the most uncomfortable punch, like a surprise poke from the straw-stuffed pillow as you wrestle your dreams back into submission. Chapter 4. Light Through Oiled Cloth and Odd Decisions. Hey there, dreamers of the absurd. Welcome back to our mildly interesting journey through the delightful chaos that was colonial life in America. Tonight, we're shining a light, well, sort of, on the rather dim homes of the early 1700s. Imagine a space that's colder than a snowman's heart and more cheerful than a cat at a dog show. But first, if you enjoy this cuddle with history dipped in humor, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment. But only if you genuinely fancy an antiquated chat about the corn-stuffed beds of yesteryear. As you settle in, dim the lights, turn on a fan, or do whatever your version of fanning a dream looks like, and let's be whisked away to a time when indoor plumbing was just a quirky idea, and global warming was simply something you experienced when you accidentally stood too close to the hearth. Now, reflect for just a moment. Have you ever struggled to see anything in a dimly lit room while also contemplating your life choices? What if that life choice was to live in a tiny, drafty home with no luxuries, like a window that didn't feel like a gateway to the outdoors on a chilly night? Perhaps you've thought, how did people manage to survive it all? Or, is there a guide for dealing with wooden shutters for Windows 101? Ever had to source a decent pair of mittens, even though the only thing in your pocket is hope and lint? Congratulations, you, my friend, have just woken up in 1715, and you've got a front row seat to the raw and the ridiculous. Bright and early, the sunlight struggles valiantly, or at least as valiantly as a weak beam of light can, through a small, square window. Imagine this. Instead of the immaculate glass we take for granted, your window frames crude wooden shutters, desperately fighting to keep the winds of fate at bay. These shutters creak open, teasing you with a glimpse of the hazy exterior filtered through oiled cloth, as if your morning routine needs a Pinterest fall decor touch-up. This is the equivalent of waking up to coffee brewed with water that had previously heated up yesterday's dishwater. You're not quite awake, but you're certainly squinting against the light with the same enthusiasm as a raccoon face-to-face with an angry Farmer Joe. Please, hold on to that thought while the residents of Colonial America contemplated the vast expanse of their not-so-pleasant mornings. Now, let's talk about the real stars of the show, the smells. Ah, yes. Breathe in that invigorating aroma of, is that last week's stew or just the charming scent of the compost heap out back? It's hard to tell, really. If you got up close and personal enough to catch a whiff of the atmosphere, no, not in a dramatic, I need a romantic partner kind of way, but more in a, this is what a turnip might smell like after a hard rain, you'd have quite the sensory experience. And speaking of fresh air, drafts were the mainstay entertainment of colonial life. akin to an unwanted family reunion. You would often find yourself snug as a bug, if that bug decided to use your life as a playground, at the mercy of zephyrs swooping in through those inadequately sealed shutters. Were you ever graced with an icy breeze that seemed to laugh at your humble existence? Imagine trying to survive a chill that felt like it was yanking your spirit back through a time portal. Aside from the draft and the potentially corporeal musings on existence, let's not forget about other cool features of your home. The walls. What do you think they were made of? Lovely, warm stucco, or perhaps alabaster charm? Oh no. Those walls were more akin to dirt mixed with sticks, mud, and if you were particularly lucky, some herbs to keep things interesting. They were expertly constructed to let in every nose-wrinkling draft while simultaneously allowing the family's livestock to saunter in and out as they pleased. Because, honestly, what's a little cow in your living space? Just momentarily overseeing your breakfast plans, surely. Now we come to media technology, social interaction. You thought, why have Netflix when you can sit around with a family of 8 in one room arguing over who gets to sleep with the dog? Because, rest assured, if you had a working hearth, oh, look at that. There's an actual chance you'll get comfortable overlooking your neighbor's unfortunate decision to not fix their animal dung-dappled abode for the past season. And as night falls, you might find the only entertainment is squabbling over which seat by the fire is the least cold. Moments like this could even lead to existential debates on whether you'd prefer the warmth of the dog's body or a strategic battle over the barn floor space. Think of it as the original reality show. Fire Wars. Who will get the good spot tonight? So there you have it, dear listener. An absurd yet oddly picturesque landscape of colonial life as you sip on the warm concoction that is whatever you've concocted for breakfast. The comfort of oiled cloth, wooden shutters, and the heartwarming company of farm odors is a romanticized take on how we one day might romanticize our own homes, complete with the ever-changing scent of mystery and the gentle rumble of family banter. And remember, in the grand tapestry of life, whether it's a dimly lit room with poorly functioning shutters or life drawing in Pennsylvania, the quest for comfort remains as timeless as your grandma's recipe for an indestructible casserole. Keep smiling as you drift off, dear friend, because tomorrow in Colonial America, there are still more delightful challenges to discover as you yawn your way through history. Chapter 5. Cold Feet, Warmer Cow Friends. Hey, dreamers of oddity and absurdity. Welcome back to our mildly interesting romp through the quirky underbelly of Colonial America. Tonight, as you shift into a cozy position, we're diving into a most invigorating morning ritual. The startling transition from delightful dreams to the cold, hard reality of a dirt floor. Let's face it, it's colder than your ice cream leftovers in a forgotten bag at the back of the freezer, unpleasantly frozen and completely unaware of its fate. Before we plunge deeper than your neighbor's last-ditch attempts at lawn maintenance, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe even leave a comment. Only if you genuinely want to reflect on the joys of roughing it in an age where indecisive breakfast choices meant flipping a coin between stale bread or leftover stew. Now, my dear listeners, take a moment to close your eyes and imagine your cozy bed, maybe with a soft blanket or a loved one snoring peacefully next to you. Now, let's contrast that with a vivid picture. Your bare feet gracing a packed dirt floor colder than a polar bear's handshake. Fuzzy slippers? Ha! Who needs those when you can have the delightful experience of feeling the earth's chilling embrace seep into every one of your toes? But really, ask yourself, have you ever wondered how people motivated themselves to start the day when every step felt like wedging your toes between 2 blocks of ice? Did they lie there thinking, maybe I'll just take up a career as a hibernating bear? And can you even imagine having to share that brief moment of cold-footed betrayal with farm animals who view your struggle with smug satisfaction? Congratulations, You've just woken up in 1715, the year when I'll bet the whole concept of warm was as foreign as a concept of indoor plumbing. The early morning rays select their favorite dusty spot and barely manage to pour in through tiny windows like a toddler attempting to squeeze through their favorite toy box. Instead of inviting warmth, you've got harsh beams of light peeling away your cozy dreams with all the subtlety of a marching band on a bumpy wagon. As you rub the sleepy out of your eyes, your floors make intimate acquaintance with your chilly toes. Yes, let's revel in the delightful sensation of trotting around on ground so firm and cold it could give concrete a run for its money. Think of it as a morning shock therapy session. Nothing like waking up and feeling a morning breeze that could easily pass for an Arctic draft. Your stones, floor, are basically just a cheerful reminder that winter is always knowing how to overstay its welcome. And what of breakfast, you ask? Oh, it's time to wander over to the kitchen corner with the same enthusiasm as a cat avoiding a bath. The aroma wafts toward your senses, a charming mix of last week's stew and childlike hopes that today's offering might, just might,
Not require dental intervention. If you could poke your head outside and shout up into the ether, "Is this what I signed up for?" you'd probably hear an indifferent revolt of rooster calls. Yep, this is it. Now, envision stepping over your cuddly friends. A cow sprawled lazily over the corner, your faithful chicken troop pecking at whatever they deem, even if it accidentally leads to the remains of last night's uneaten casserole. Sure, nothing screams a day in the life like making your way through a squad of farmyard friends who regard your morning stumble with a blend of bemusement and mild judgment. Nothing says, "Welcome to my day," like being stared down by a confused goat. Let's not forget about the delightful indoor ambience created by, those fragrant drafts. Imagine the thrill of being snuggled under a patchwork of bed sheets. It's like the ultimate snuggle blanket experience meets the intense, heart-pounding horror of realizing the wind is not just a bother, but a constant reminder of Mother Nature's mischievousness. The only thing resisting the freeze is likely your ongoing battle with mosquitoes. Or was that the ghost of livestock past? By now, you might find yourself on a parallel universe of relative absurdity, exploring the delicate balance of life between heat sources and dramatic gusts. Is this the Great Huddle event, where you and your housemates engage in the intricate dance of avoiding frostbite while appreciating the warmth of a ridiculously overstuffed straw mattress that feels like sleeping on a pile of butter-covered rocks? Who knows? But guess what, brave dreamers? That's just the beginning. You're standing on the brink of an exciting day in Colonial America, where every chilly toe and the musky odor of your surroundings keeps your cheeks rosy, your spirit buoyant, and your thoughts wildly entertained with dramatic narratives of daily life. Laugh it up, because if you don't, those frigid mornings will feel less like waking up and more like preparing for a life-threatening adventure. So, as you let the chatter of farm life lull you back into warmth, remember, every bump in the floor and draft leaves you rejuvenated for whatever absurdity awaits in this cold, unsanitary life of Colonial America. With toes now begrudgingly accepting the chill, the hilarity of surviving such extremes is where the fun begins. And tomorrow? Well, let's just say it might be time for more creative farming practices, or something equally bizarre. As you nestle into the charming chaos of your colonial existence, may your dreams be as warm as your floor is cold. Sleep tight, dear friend, because tomorrow is another day to confront the quirks of human life in a world paved with dirt, challenged by ice, and filled with delightful farm friends.
Chapter 6. The Hearth's Heartbreak. Hey guys, welcome back to our mildly interesting dive into the chilly quirks of Colonial America. Tonight, we're warming up by the emotional and somewhat unsanitary hearth of the early 1700s. Imagine, if you will, a woman in simple, coarse linen clothing, a fabric so rough that it could double as a workout tool. There she is, kneeling down beside a massive stone hearth, gently coaxing oblivious embers back from the land of irrelevance. Yes, it's a matter of life and warmth, and let's be honest, the stakes are higher than ever. If she fails, her family will not only wake up in the cold, they'll also have to confront the horror of consuming breakfast tepid enough to rattle the timbers. So, as you settle into your cozy nook, dimming the lights and maybe even putting on those trusty old socks, allow the images of this colonial kitchen to sweep over you like a poorly sewn quilt. How did they even start their days back in the 1700s? Did they muffle their morning groans with sprigs of rosemary? And what about personal hygiene? Ever wonder if washing up back then literally meant just splashing a few drops of cold water on your face and praying for the best? Did they think themselves masterful in their ability to outsmell last week's stew? If you're ready to explore the genuine discomfort of being a colonial hearth wrangler, congratulations. You've just woken up in a small, drafty home in 1720. The first thing you realize is that the world hasn't warmed up yet, because mornings in colonial America hit harder than your alarm clock on a Monday. You shuffle over to the hearth, a structure so massive that it could double as a medieval throne if you squint hard enough and ignore the soot. The embers, bless their stubborn little hearts, are glowing like that one friend who insists the party doesn't start until they show up. But here's the kicker. Just because they're glowing doesn't mean they're warm. You grab hold of a few small sticks, because apparently nothing brings joy to the morning like the conscious choice to become a fire magician. Breathe in the smell of burning wood. It's as comforting as a beloved childhood memory, if your childhood involved sitting next to a campfire that smelt like a family of wet dogs and questionable last-minute barbecue decisions. Carefully, you nurse the fire with kindling like it's a fragile newborn, waiting breathlessly for that first spark of flame. Let's pause for a moment. If you were back in your current, gloriously modern life, boiling a kettle of water or prepping a French press, how do you think the colonial hearth wrangler would react? What's that, dear friend? Piping hot water, ready at the flick of a switch? You clearly live in a realm of sorcery. Because nothing says, "Welcome to your childhood," quite like needing to enact a daily ritual of persuasion just to warm your frozen toes. And if you think it's tedious,
Now, just imagine that it was all but a warm-up exercise for every meal you had to cook from absolute scratch. Or, more accurately, every meal you battled the elements to conjure. Imagine for a moment that you're having a casual chat with your friend tonight about how convenient it would be to have labor-saving devices. You could begrudgingly mention the latest kitchen tech. But our brave colonial hearth defenders? They had to face the triumphs and trials of fire building with all the aplomb of a sleep-deprived toddler trying to put together a Lego set without the manual. Oh look, it's the morning chaos where I either successfully create a toasty nook or self-ignite like a wildly inappropriate birthday cake. Across the room, there's your brand new friend, the iron pot. It hangs over the hearth like a metallic gift from a beleaguered deity, perpetually promising delights while also making sure you're aware that rancid soup is only a few hours away. Cooking, my dear friends, wasn't just about nourishment. It was an art form and a science experiment that would typically end with someone crying over charred remains and a kitchen filled with smoke that could easily double as a performance art piece titled Fires of Despair. What's that? You fear for the cleanliness of your morning meal? Ha! Colonial America had you covered. You see, scrubbing was an art lost on most. Any hint of personal hygiene in the 17th century was an adventurous surrender to submission. So, dining alongside critters that flitted about with a borderline invasive enthusiasm was all part of living the suave life. Those reassuring wafts emanating from the kitchen could be a blend of wholesome stew or last week's meat pie that somehow survived the apocalypse. Talk about culinary reincarnation. Bring life to abandoned leftovers. So as you finally coax the kindling to catch fire, the smell of forced warmth filling the air, you glimpse joy in the flame flickering. Because therein lies the heart of the colonial existence, warmth found only in the most laborious of routines. When faced with the abyss of cold mornings, all things, from hearth to humor, absolutely come together. As you lean closer to the hearth, embrace the absurdity of it all. You're surrounded not just by a hearth, but by the warmth of a community embracing the chill, sharing moments of triumph and chuckling over soup from last Tuesday. So, as you allow yourself to be lulled into the embrace of this mildly historical humor journey, remember, every ember, every struggle, weaves into the tapestry of absurdity that is colonial life. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as warm as that fire, without the lingering scent of dubious meat pie.
Chapter 7. Breathing in Frosty Reality. Hey guys, welcome back to our cozy corner of mildly intriguing tales from the past. Tonight, we're diving into a reality colder than your least favorite childhood memory involving your mom's infamous casserole. The brisk mornings of colonial America in the early 1700s. Picture this. You've just woken up, and the air is so frigid it practically bites back. If you were expecting soft sheets and a gentle sunrise, sorry to burst that dream bubble. Giant puffs of steam rise from your breath, as though your soul itself is trying to escape the chill of your damp, drafty abode. Before you drift into that bleak, yet oddly fascinating world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Only if you're actually enjoying this half-mad historical odyssey, of course. Nothing like a little engagement to warm up our digital hearth, right? Now, grab your comfiest blanket and prepare for a journey that makes winter walks to the mailbox seem like a day at the beach. Have you ever pondered what early risers did to prepare for the day in such bone-chilling conditions? Were their feet as frozen as your last attempt at an ice bath? And let's not even start on breakfast. Was it more of a soggy mess in a bowl situation than a delightful morning feast? Perhaps the worst question of all, did they ever manage to survive without a single hot shower? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1720 in a home constructed from questionable materials with a roof that seems more interested in collecting icicles than providing a barrier against the elements. As you crack open your eyes, you might initially wonder if you're in an episode of a historical reality show gone wrong. The stone fireplace lurks ominously in the corner, threatening warmth, but offering only the ghostly memory of what it once was. Your body fights back a groan as you shuffle towards the hearth, and your feet, those poor, unprotected little frost-bitten soles, meet the frigid floor like penguins diving into Arctic waters. It's as if your dwelling has spent the night rehearsing for a how to be as cold as possible event. The air is thicker than the mystery meat your mother-in-law served last Thanksgiving, and you're left inhaling tiny clouds of your own making. Your breath evaporates into the chilly atmosphere, along with any remaining hopes of a smooth morning. Now, let's talk about getting that fire going. What kind of sorcery do you think was required to coax a spark from the depths of charcoal-stuffed lifelessness? You retrieve twigs, sticks, and kindling like a winter wizard casting a desperate spell for warmth. Each time a spark threatens to ignite, it just gives you a non-committal flicker, like that one friend who's perpetually working on themselves. Think back to your modern kitchen, where the buttons of a preheat oven are just a quick poke away. Do you think our brave forebears would have given anything for a quick appliance? You can almost hear their collective sigh of disbelief. What do you mean you can heat your breakfast in under 5 minutes? That sounds like magic. Your fire-building efforts resemble a comedic slapstick routine. You cradle the kindling, whispering sweet nothings and coaxing it to flame with the enthusiasm of a parent at a school play. Come on, little buddy, we've got a frosty breakfast to warm up. It's a delicate dance between hope and chaos. You see, cooking in this unforgiving environment is less about culinary excellence and more akin to an episode of a survival challenge, where the only prize is preventing the family from licking the frost off their breakfast bowls. And speaking of the contents in those bowls, ever think you could rival modern cuisine with a leftover stew that could probably qualify for a science experiment? It's an odd sensation, knowing that last week's meat pie is still somehow creeping around the kitchen. Trust me, moving around the drafting rooms of a colonial kitchen is a dance of delirium. Here you are, grumbling about the cold when, behold, your stove is quite literally the hearth itself. The chamber pot sits unceremoniously by the wall, like a guest who overstayed their welcome, hinting at what might happen if you're not careful. Let's pause for some reflection. Ever thought of using your morning restroom dash as a form of cold exposure therapy? As you glance at your iron pot, a gleaming, albeit heavily dented ally, hanging ominously above the fire like a culinary sword of Damocles, you realize it promises flavor, but often delivers mystery. Cooking here is not just nourishment, it's an epic saga of battling bad ingredients and dodging critters that have decided to take up residency. Each day, a hot meal is like lottery-winning gold. Without consistent understanding of proper sanitation, definitely no health department observing here, you might find yourself dining on something that wouldn't even make the cut on a survival show. Look, kids, today's feature, a delightful blend of old grains, a pinch of mystery herb, and merely a whisper of freshness. While you stare deeply into the fire, let this warm your heart and gut just a tiny bit. Colonial life may have lacked conveniences, but what it truly excelled in was the fine art of persistent absurdity. You chuckle at the thought of their daily struggles, every flame real and metaphorical, igniting the absurdity that lay in survival. Because amidst the laughter and simmering soups that dared to challenge expectations, the warmth found in absurdity was far more fulfilling than mere heat. So dive deep into that tapestry of moments, where life wasn't always comfortable, but it was hilariously unpredictable. And as you lean back and allow those remnants of firelight to cloak you in warmth, do remember, every struggle, every laugh etched in the history of colonial America is a reminder that when
It's cold outside, we can still find the warmth hidden within the absurdity of life. Sleep well, and may your dreams be a delightfully cozy mixture, not unlike a mystery stew gone gloriously right. Chapter 8. Fabric of Reality, Itch and All. Welcome back, dear listeners, to the delightful and painfully true saga of colonial life. Now that you've shivered through the freezing fast of winter mornings, we're sliding into the realm of fabric, specifically that charmingly scratchy clothing that your early 18th century self would have sported like a walking fleece factory. Imagine, if you will, the soft touch of modern athleisure. Now, let's throw that vision into a blender with a rusty toaster for a reality check. The textiles of colonial America were less about comfort and more like a medieval boot camp for your skin. Your charming colonial cloak, if we can even call it that, rustles like a bad joke when you move. We're talking about hand-woven fabrics that look like they were made from the finest goats you could find at the nearest petting zoo, which is fitting because they likely carried more scent than a goat barn on a hot day. Ah, yes, the aromatic essence of daily hard labor mixed with a tablespoon of aged wool and just a pinch of smoke. It's practically a signature fragrance for those who braved life in the 1700s. Now, here's an even wilder thought. What if the average colonial citizen had washing machines? Excuse me, sir, might you be able to bypass the whole scrubbing your clothes in a stream routine? My wool coat smells suspiciously like last week's livestock adventure. Spoiler alert, not happening. Cloth was a luxury, and cleaning it involved less Tide Pods and then some. Visualize yourself, the forward-thinking soul that you are, trapped in this woolen nightmare that doubles as armor against chilly winds. And trust me, being itchy was not on the fashion agenda. The sensation of coarse linen on your skin could best be described as wrestling an angry cactus while simultaneously doing the cha-cha. Unbeknownst to you, your clothing drama was a mere warm-up act for the ongoing cultural phenomenon that was personal hygiene. or lack thereof. Now, let's talk about the aroma wafting through your threadbare costume. Imagine the scent of honesty mixing with smoke, sweat, and a hint of, who are we kidding? It's more of a full-bodied musk. Every fabric you sported came with an undeniable olfactory tale, like fine wine, only worse. Who needs the power of scent marketing when you can simply put on your unwashed wool from last week's pie contest? Each tiny thread was like an uninvited guest at an intimate dinner party, just sitting there, drenching every conversation with that lingering aroma of late-night farm work. Sorry, I didn't mean to smell like productivity. Now, as you step into your daily garb, let's marvel at the style choices of the time. Layering was an art form. It was less about looking runway ready and more about transforming yourself into a human lasagna. Capes, cloaks, and tunics piled upon each other. Just one more. This will be great for that Siberian winter air
that we call a spring breeze. Every additional layer was a bold declaration that you were ready to take on whatever the weather, or your neighbors, could throw at you. But mostly it'd just have you sweating like a pig during a summer heat wave. You know the feeling when you think you can finally tackle a new workout? Well, colonial life was like that. But the workout consisted of shivering in every layer while also sneaking bites of the last week's meat pie you've been holding for an emergency. And what about footwear? Oh, the shoes. One can only imagine the sound of footfalls echoing eerily through the streets as clumsy colonial citizens waddled around like baby ducks in ill-fitting leather boots. With each creaky step, you'd be wondering if you were about to trip over your own history. The reality of daily routines was surprisingly amusing. Just imagine slipping into those snuggly, woolly depths and preparing for the day like you're about to enter a stage production. Only your production features laborious farm work and a desperate search for clean water. Between the scratchiness of wool and the occasional errant flea that fancied your leg as a welcome mat, how could life not feel like an ironic comedy? As the day unfolds, you can practically hear the hustle and bustle of neighbors swaddled in their own woolly woes, complete with their own chemical odors of hard labor and hopeful stew. Every day they'd wake up, don the fabric of reality, and launch into a series of exaggerated contortions as they fidgeted away the itches. Talk about a life full of character. Ah, but therein lies the beautiful irony of it all. When you're all bundled up, uncomfortable, and possibly the embodiment of a human burrito, at least you can always chuckle at the absurdity of it all. The colonial experience might have been rough around the edges, but it was certainly rich in laughter and absurd moments that would fill history books if anyone had the time and energy to write them down. So, as you nestle down in your own cozy bed, remember, life in the 1700s was a game of survival played in layers. With an ongoing debate about fashion and fabric, no one would ever truly win. Snuggle in tight, dear dreamers, and let the wools of old wrap around you, bringing a sense of laughter and absurdity, reminding you that everyone's struggles are somehow woven into the fabric of humanity itself. Sweet dreams. Chapter 9. Stump the Historical Guide. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mildly Interesting History, where the past is so absurdly odd that getting comfortable with it feels a bit like snuggling up to your weird uncle at Thanksgiving. Tonight, we delve into something colder than an ice cream truck driver's smile in February: the daily life of colonial Americans. You might think they had it all figured out, but trust me, they were just a few sweaty layers from imploding at any moment. Before we kick off our journey through history, why don't you take a moment to dim those lights, turn on that fan, not because it's hot, but because, well, it might help mask the scent of desperation, and get situated. You'll need a cozy spot to buckle in for a delightful ride through time. Have you ever thought about what life was like when personal space was a foreign concept and bathing was a national sport? How did these brave souls manage to survive in a world where luxury meant a slightly smaller flea infestation? And let's not talk about the whole clean clothes concept. Who even came up with that, right? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1700s Colonial America, where the air is crispy, the manners are quaint but over the top, and every surviving day is a new episode of What Could Possibly Go Wrong? Now, let's step outside and take a good look around. Picture this. You stumble out of your wooden home, which can only be described as a cleverly designed wind tunnel, to discover your surroundings dominated by thick, stubborn tree stumps. They stand defiantly, like an unsightly forest of ancient sculptures that'd give modern art a run for its money. What happened here? Land clearing, of course. The colonists were on a quest to conquer nature with as much finesse as a bull in a china shop. Ah, yes. Those gnarled stumps proudly proclaim that what was once a dense, wild forest is now a patchy landscape where dreams go to die. As you kick at the stumps, fibers from the wood erupt like poorly executed confetti from a party no one attended. You can almost hear the trees sobbing in their woodsy graves, whispering, "This wasn't the plan. They didn't even ask." The ground is uneven, a hazardous obstacle course that feels like an overzealous attempt at structuring a backyard soccer match, but instead of goalposts, you've got roots ready to trip you up at every corner. Did you remember to wear sturdy shoes? Too bad. You'll now embrace your new identity as the colonial klutz. The air is crisp, making each breath feel like a refreshing slap to your face, something your 21st century self wouldn't really mind if it came from an overpriced therapy session. The rich, loamy smell of the earth fills your nostrils, mingling weirdly with the pungent scent of that patch of mud, and who knows what secrets it holds. You might be tempted to whisper sweet nothings to the ground, but let's keep it PG. After all, it might just be harboring a seasonal flu or two. Morning rituals in colonial America have their own peculiar charm. As you stand amidst the stumps, pondering the meaning of life and whether there's a local coffee shop opening up soon, spoiler, there isn't, consider the delightful variety of activities that await you. For one, every household must begin the painstaking task of gathering firewood to combat the chill. Sounds adorable, right? Wrong. It's less like, let's build a cozy fire, and more like, who can dodge angry wildlife while dragging a log bigger than themselves? And how can we possibly forget about breakfast? You know, the most important meal of the day, unless you're stuck with a roster of, let's say, uninspiring fare. Imagine, you're served a nice bowl of corn mush that could double as wall plaster. Seriously, every spoonful is akin to having an old shoe in your mouth, but it's filled with fiber. Your stomach grumbles in protest as you try to suppress thoughts about those delicious artisanal avocado toasts that your friend keeps posting about. Oh, how you long for a slice of modernity, preferably one that doesn't involve grinding your own corn or considering how much sugar is too much for the local bears you might accidentally attract. Exhaustion comes quickly when you're living the colonial dream. You're now flinging bundles of hay into a rickety cart that might as well be made from toothpicks and bad decisions. Every effort is a miracle, and every smirk from a neighbor is a reminder that humor is, in fact, a valid coping mechanism in these audacious times. You share a knowing glance with the local farmer, and suddenly you are both in on the absurdity of it all. The daily struggle to not just exist, but to do so with an air of dignity, while simultaneously covered in dirt and fending off insects larger than the average ascent annual. But at the end of the day, as you sit by your potentially lit fire, if you actually manage to start it, you can take solace in the fact that despite the stumps, the wild foods, and that regrettable corn mush, you are living through a comedy that only the past can serve up with such artistic flair. You might be one itch away from a full-blown existential crisis, but hey, at least you're not the first to forget about the soap they forgot to produce. No, that's a story for another time. A toast to you, brave souls navigating the cold reality of life in colonial America. With layers of quirks, a stumping landscape, and a sense of humor, we move steadily into our next adventure. One where maybe, just maybe, you can find clean laundry among the laughs. Chapter 10. Smoke Signals of Survival. Hey guys, Welcome back to another installment of Mildly Interesting History, where we dive into the past with all the grace of a moose on roller skates. Tonight, we shift our focus to a reality colder and dirtier than a polar bear's backside: the magnificent and not so magnificent daily life in colonial America. So grab your favorite lumpy blanket, settle in, and get ready to explore a time when the phrase personal hygiene evoked more confusion than the last episode of that show you tried to finish but fell asleep on. Before we thrust ourselves into this world, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe drop a comment. If you actually enjoy this absurdity, that is. No pressure though, our ancestors survived on less. Now, dim the lights, turn on that fan, not because it's hot, but to cover up the historical odor of despair that's dripping from the pages of the past, and get cozy. Let's talk about cold mornings, like "why did I wake up like this" type of cold, and the personal quest of finding out if breakfast might just be the most regrettable decision of the day. But hold on, where in the world is the coffee? That heavenly brew might as well have been a unicorn in 1700s America. So, picture this. You wake up amid the foreboding sound of your neighbor's rooster, which, while you appreciate the attempt at waking you up, sounds less like a chirpy bird and more like a rusty gate protesting against another day of labor. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the early 1700s. The sun is rising, but you probably won't notice it through the dense fog, smoke, and the lingering scent of yesterday's stew that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Ah yes, smoke rising from numerous chimneys across the scattered wooden homesteads, like giant, soot-covered candles flickering and waving to each other. Hey, this is how we live. Now let's paint a picture of this morning's delight. You step outside, squinting against the sunlight that somehow still looks cold, and it graces you with its presence as kind of a half-hearted apology for being up so early. The homes around you are charming in a rugged way, small wooden structures that could probably qualify for an art exhibit called "You Can't Make This Up," living in a giant matchbox. As you walk over, each step sends a small shiver from your toes to the tips of your ailing pride. The mud squelches underfoot, a harmony of squish and disappointment. It's less the sound of nature and more an orchestra of patience-draining slogs that sings, "Can we really just have one day without stepping in something questionable?" And there are those famous chimneys, puffing away. It's not just eclectic home decor. They represent the universal truth of community survival. You see, fire is a matter of life and death, far more significant than your cousin Gary's Facebook rants about the latest Netflix series. It keeps homes warm, cooks questionable meals that may or may not contain a rogue rat, and blesses the local air quality with an aroma that would challenge even the most persistent air freshener. Speaking of warmth, as you breathe in the smoky air, you might simultaneously question the idea of fresh air altogether. You know, this isn't exactly what the wellness influencers would advocate. Well, you might as well be known as the chic pioneer huddling around a fire pit with your family while roasting, surprise, surprise, yesterday's leftovers. Nothing like a bundle of moldy bread to accompany yesterday's suspiciously dry venison. Now, let's talk about morning routines, because when you think about it, nobody really knew what that meant in the 1700s. The process involved roughly 37 steps, and some of them included washing one's face with water that might just house their neighbor's pet chicken floating by. Oh, and don't forget about breakfast. You'd likely find yourself slurping down some corn mush that had more texture than flavor. Each bowl could double as either a savory meal or an experiment in relentless endurance. The question you inevitably ask yourself is this even safe to eat? The answer is, of course, a resounding, who knows? Just smile and swallow. Now, let's not forget the other joys of morning preparations. You're dressed in layers that seem to trap the smell of livestock and smoke like some sort of perverse cologne. Feeling regal in your woolen rags? Perfect. But remember, you haven't fully joined the ranks of daily life until you fearlessly combated a swarm of flies with the grace of a failed windmill. Outside, neighbors fumble with firewood, that too unpredictable wood that either sparks a comforting flame
or throws out embarrassing amounts of sarcasm when it refuses to light. You're less, let's gather for a nice group activity, and more, who can hurl logs while greeting the local wildlife? But despite it all, you can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it. Everyone is collectively engaged in a comical battle against the elements, wildlife, and their own subconscious need for heat. Amidst the smoke and the struggle, it is life, raw, unfiltered, and riddled with layers of humor that really only a couple hundred years could highlight. So raise a rough-hewn toast of corn mush to our colonial ancestors, my friends. The daily reality sprinkled with a dash of comedic charm and the delightful absurdity of survival, all in the name of keeping warm amid that cold, unsanitary reality of daily life. Now, let's trudge on into the next chapter.
Chapter 11, Bucket Brigade Blues. The morning ritual of Colonial America, a time when personal hygiene and an efficient water supply were about as real as a unicorn in a drive-thru. Picture it. It's the early 1700s, and you've just rolled out of your warmish bed, probably filled with something akin to dried moss and maybe a couple of genuinely confused bedbugs. Your first order of business? Awkwardly walk around your humble abode just long enough to manage some semblance of consciousness. Now, let's talk about a little thing called water. You might be accustomed to just twisting a tap and letting all those precious hydration droplets cascade down like a gentle waterfall. But in this time period, no such luck, my friend. Instead, you fancy yourself a runner, quite literally, as you strap on your best yet terribly unflattering woolen attire, ready to embark on a heroic trek to the nearest well or stream. So you step outside, and boom, instant shock of cold air hits you, gripping your toes with the tenacity of an enthusiastic toddler at snack time. In the distance, you can see it, the well. Your heart might leap a little, thinking of that sweet, refreshing H2O, but don't get ahead of yourself. It's more like embarking on an expedition to find the last slice of pizza at a team party. Worth it, but oh, the hurdles. As you stagger across the mud, which, might I add, resembles something akin to a reluctant swamp monster, you find yourself grappling with these rickety wooden buckets. Let's pause for a moment here to really appreciate what this entails. Watch your footing, for goodness sake. Each step sends a little splash of water sloshing over the side, while grumbling to yourself about how it would have been caveman easy if these buckets had wheels. Each time you lift the bucket, it's like testing your own one-person CrossFit regime. But these are not exactly dumbbells. Oh no. These are heavy wooden contraptions that are more like medieval kettlebells, except they don't come with a gentle reminder to drink more water post-workout. Speaking of workouts, have you ever accidentally tried to flex your biceps while carrying a gallon of milk? Multiply that awkwardness by 100, and voila, you've got yourself the ultimate colonial experience. The sloshing of water mirrors your personal struggle as you make your way back home. The scent of wet earth accompanies you like an uninvited guest, clinging on tighter than your Aunt Marge when you see her at family gatherings. Each swing of the bucket is an unspoken dare to your very existence. Can you make it back without spilling me everywhere? The answer is usually a resounding no. Now, let's not forget the ambience. In the early 1700s, the soundscape was nothing short of riveting. A mix of delighted roosters that screech as if they were auditioning for a part in a horror film, the faint bleating of sheep, and the odd dog barking somewhere in the distance, possibly debating existential crisis. Why am I barking at nothing? Is my fate to guard this house forever? Ah, what main character energy! And just as you think you've triumphed over this glib water gauntlet, here comes your neighbor, Samuel, who you just know has been perfecting his lumberjack look for a good 5 years now. He's lugging his own buckets back and looks at you with the kind of pity typically reserved for someone stuck in an elevator with a mime. "Ah, brave soul, still on the water hunt?" he quips. And you can't help but wonder if he just spilled a bit of his water on your dignity, or if you lost that at the well. It's hard work being a colonial water fetcher.
You might think the real strife happened in the taverns or during the occasional skirmish with British troops, but surprise, the true reality of daily life is often about such mundane tasks. Each drop is a testament to your strength, and a constant reminder of how much you'd really prefer Starbucks over this whole operation. Once inside, you pour the precious water into a jug, feeling triumphant, superhero level accomplished. But you've barely made it beyond this one chore when the reality of daily life hits. Every task feels like going from a basic quiz to a finals marathon in minutes. You're staring down laundry that requires hot water. Sorry, good luck with that. Milking cows. Does anyone else find it strange how we're cool with drinking someone else's food? And whatever makeshift meal you must whip up instead of that charming brunch fare we take for granted today. You pour a glass. Okay, maybe not a glass. Let's stick with a friendly wooden bowl and take that first sip of fresh water, as satisfying as finding a rogue piece of chocolate in your pockets. Until you remember that this water isn't coming from a lovely filtered system. In fact, you've probably just gulped down a dash of livestock leavings for good measure. But oh well, cheers to digestive fortitude and whatever comes next in your colonial life. As you ponder over the unsettling taste of farm-fresh water, the humor of it all hits you. The struggles of fetching water are a daily adventure, comparable to a modern-day grocery run where you inevitably question your choices in front of the cheese aisle. So, hats off to you, colonial water warriors. You've survived yet another chapter of daunting daily life with a bucket full of pride and more than a little splash of humor.
Chapter 12. A Porridge Predicament. You shuffle back inside from your heroic water-fetching expedition, lungs filled with fresh air and a hint of that delightful early morning mud scent. The glorious sight that greets you? A thick, iron pot hanging over a sputtering fire, your kitchen's not-so-secret weapon. As you approach, the warm wave of porridge steam flows over you like a cozy blanket, albeit one that's seen better days and probably has a reputation for things that chew. Now, what's cooking in this bubbling cauldron, you ask? Ah, it's a fine example of culinary innovation straight from the culinary depths of Colonial America. Steaming cornmeal porridge. Yes, that's right, cornmeal. You might think of it as the humble cousin of fancy oatmeal, but in this era, it's practically the only reliable dish keeping your stomach from auditioning for a role in a horror movie about starvation. The pot makes an audible gurgle, like a cat that's eaten one too many mice. Seeing this, you hoist your trusty wooden ladle, your new best friend in this unglamorous adventure, right into that bubbling cauldron. Be careful not to poke a chicken mascot, or you may end up with a snack for the neighborhood hawk instead of breakfast. Scooping the thick, gooey porridge is not exactly an Olympic endeavor, but it does require a bit of finesse. The viscid texture is reminiscent of that one awkward date when everything went wrong and left you feeling like you'd swallowed a lump of cement. And here's the twist. This porridge is about as fancy as a medieval grocery bag. Non-existent spices, inconsistently stirred, and flavors that can only be described as, well, it's food. So here you are, ladled porridge glistening on your wooden trencher. What a gourmet masterpiece. You pause for a moment to contemplate the reality of your new life. Is it wrong to wish for something more exciting? Pineapple on a pizza, perhaps? A deep-fried whatever? But alas, that ship has sailed, much like the good taste in this porridge. Let's take a minute to savor this culinary creation. You lift a spoonful to your mouth, and as it touches your palate, the first sensation is warm, which is definitely an improvement. Next comes the textural symphony of mush, echoing in your mouth like the ghost of last week's marketing meeting. Follow this up with the faintest hint of, is that disappointment? A solid nod to the colonial love for simplicity. A dish so unremarkable, it's practically an afterthought. As the porridge slides down your throat, you can't help but wonder, is everyone else eating this? How do we survive without garlic bread?
The answer is likely yes. At times, the idea of flavor feels as far removed from reality as spotting a unicorn at the local tavern. Much like a tense family dinner, you paper cut your way through this one bowl at a time. Let's pause for a moment to tune into the culinary score of your era. The ambience of
The kitchen has its own quirky charm. Every scrape of porridge against wood resonates like an off-key ukulele in a backyard barbecue. The smoke curling from the fire dances with a flair only the most disorganized of chefs could appreciate. Grandeur meets chaos, with a fascinating undercurrent of burnt wood and corn. Visualize characters in this kitchen. There's your neighbor, Elizabeth, who bursts in just as you're trying to swallow the last mouthful of this creamy delight. Not the best moment, true. She's cheerful, bearing a loaf of bread that looks suspiciously like it's survived the last 3 months under a rock. She holds it out to you with the enthusiasm of someone who's just discovered they can fit their entire foot inside a boot. "Want some?" she chirps, and you can't help but wonder if she's trying to be kind or just make you feel worse about your fine cornmeal porridge. "Ah, Elizabeth," you croak, attempting to be polite while sidestepping a mouthful of disappointed textures. "Your generosity is as fragrant as this porridge." At that, you choke down abstract thoughts about chatting her up at the next market while already loving her bread, which is giving off vibes that deeply oscillate between potential sustenance and crunchy pebble. A calculated risk, if ever there was one. In this moment of culinary improvisation, you start appreciating a troubling truth. The great irony of colonial life lies in its reluctance to proceed straight to your kitchen. Cooking, especially porridge, is quite literally an exercise in adequacy. Is this not compared to squeezing into your favorite jeans after eating a dozen donuts? As the day unfolds, you sidle over to the hearth, your porridge-filled trenchers in hand, feeling quite heroic. Even if the culinary creation seems much more, "It will hold my body together," than "I'll only eat fruits and vegetables for breakfast." And so, you find yourself far from a 5-star restaurant, while gracefully learning to find humor in this spoonful of history. The world outside must be thrilling, you ponder aloud, a slow realization dawning upon you. Surviving another day in colonial America is an intricate tapestry woven from curiosity, a hunt for tantalizing morsels, and of course, the endless struggle against porridge that could put a grown bear to sleep. With a final spoonful, blessed by the very winds of fate, you settle into this unremarkable routine, enveloped in laughter and absurdities, an oddly comforting port in the storm of daily life, where every porridge-filled moment is just one more chapter in this grand, chaotic adventure. Chapter 13. Trencher Trouble. So, here you are, clutching a simple, rough, wooden bowl trencher. Not because you're auditioning for a culinary revolution, but because metal forks are about as rare as a unicorn sighting in these colonial parts. In fact, you might even say the only thing more elusive is the last opportunity to have a genuinely good night's sleep. But we'll get back to that later. As you survey the motley assortment of food heaped in the trencher, you can't help but admire the sheer audacity of the splatter that is, hold on to your knickers, approximately 4% edible. Yes, this is a true reflection of early 18th century colonial cuisine, where sepia-toned dreams of haute cuisine fade into reality more reminiscent of a raccoon rummaging through a half-eaten sandwich. What delights await you today? Well, after a delightful breakfast of cornmeal porridge, which still lingers in your mind like a bad sitcom joke, you've now upgraded to leftover stewed something or other. If it weren't for the strange but suspicious aroma wafting your way, you might even consider it gourmet. But let's tread lightly here. The local wildlife, if not already lurking in your kitchen, might soon be auditioning for the role of dinner companion. As you skillfully, awkwardly, attempt to scoop up this mysterious concoction with a piece of dried bread, you can practically hear your wooden trencher laughing at you. It's a heartwarming sound, like an elderly person trying to blow into a kazoo. The bread is stale enough to potentially serve as a weapon, or at the very least, as questionable building materials. If this were a project for a home improvement show, the host would surely shake their head and say, "No thanks, let's not." Your first attempt at scooping results in more of a launch than an actual scoop. The bread flops over, sending a splash of food in directions physics had not intended. Ever witnessed a plate glass window shattering against a brick wall? Well, my friend, your kitchen dinner party is now a crime scene of sorts. With a measuring cup's worth of questionable stew swimming on the floor, you can't help but contemplate dinner etiquette. Was there a recommended method for navigating such culinary chaos without devolving into a personal episode of Survivor Kitchen Edition? Should you laugh? Apologize to someone imaginary? Or maybe your best option is a dignified retreat while pretending your knees are suddenly very, very interested in the floor. Your neighbors are cheering you on, though you can't be sure if the claps are genuine admiration or snarky ribbing. They likely wouldn't mind if you added them to your next serving of treachery. Looking around at their cracked smiles, you can just imagine their thoughts. Ah, to have a wooden trencher, but can she truly scoop without calamity? With a deep breath, and perhaps an inappropriate prayer to the culinary gods, you steal a glance down at your bread, pondering if this is just an elaborate exercise in prioritizing your survival instincts. Should you save the last piece of dried bread for an emergency, or throw caution to the wind? Dilemmas, my friend. Modern life has nothing on this. And while the common folk back in the day were leveling up their dirt floors and thatched roofs quite effortlessly, you are about to undertake an entirely separate kind of battle. You find yourself wondering if a bad slice of pizza is your destiny, or sheer luck, compared to what's happening right here. All right, so you muster a grip as your fingers wrap around the trencher. You take the plunge, dabbing the dry bread into the stew, where the thick goo seems to conspire against your effort with its insistent resolve to become one with the air, or perhaps a local raccoon, minimizing your return on investment. Delicious, you convince yourself between murmurs of regret, resisting the urge to retch as you take that fateful first bite. The flavors wash over you like a damp sponge in an infomercial. Nothing quite sealing the deal, but decidedly present. The sustenance is truly reminiscent of that root vegetable your neighbor may or may not have fed you last week, though you struggle to remember which neighbor it was because, at this point, they could all successfully be featured in a reality TV show titled, "Ain't Nobody Got Time for Good Ingredients." The really unfortunate truth is that not only is this meal an uphill culinary battle, but you've elected to consume it in the presence of flies, who are living their best lives around your trencher, now resembling a welcoming party for whatever else might be on the menu tonight. If flies had Yelp reviews, tonight's dinner could have a solid rating, but only if you count atmosphere and curious reactions. So here you are, conquering the impossible meal that will forever be etched in your memory. Because, honestly, it'll probably take up a space there as you attempt to find comfort in the fact you may have ingested a fly or two. As you chew, you ponder the sharp reality of life in colonial America, how far the rights of man have come, and yet, here you are, battling soup with a piece of bread. If only Thomas Jefferson knew about your trenchers, but then again, he might have just added a few more pages to his political treatise about the essential rights to proper dining implements. At last, the final bite disappears into an unceremonious swallow, and you can't help but think that every spoonful of this meal has been a delightful distraction from what surely lies ahead. The quest to stay alive in a world where a single metal fork could be the new global currency. Life in the colonies might be rough, but as you settle back into your corner of the kitchen, spoon still in hand, you realize that surviving this dinner is another unique chapter in your absurd history. A chapter where the humor is punchy, the food questionable, and the trenches never truly dry. How delightful. Chapter 14. Timber Transformations. Ah, welcome to your cozy little colonial abode. Picture this. A stout, hand-hewn timber frame standing bravely against the elements, like a small wooden gladiator in a battle of survival. You have to admire the craftsmanship. It's a thing of beauty. But let's be honest here. When you think beautiful home, you're likely not envisioning a structure held together with wooden pegs and a sprinkling of a prayer that it doesn't collapse under the weight of snow or well-meaning roof raccoons. As you stroll through your modest home, you might notice that every single nail and beam was meticulously, and, might I add, exhaustively, crafted from scratch. Yes, it's the ultimate DIY project gone slightly wrong, like trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions while blindfolded and with the wrong tools. Each timber represents a small mountain of labor, a testament to the people of the early 1700s and their way of life. Essentially, 80% sweat, 10% ingenuity, and the rest? Well, let's call it a healthy sprinkling of existential dread. Now imagine this. You grab hold of one of these wooden beams. Not just any beam, but a solid hunk of history that would make lumberjacks weep with pride. You'd think it would be smooth and inviting, but alas, it has the texture of a porcupine's backside. The house is far from quaint. It's more of a cozy fortress, a charming confine where every creak of the floorboards can easily be mistaken for a ghost trying to communicate that you really should have invested in a better roofing system. What's that smell wafting through the cozy confines? Is it your neighbor's supper? Or perhaps an avant-garde interpretation of hog husbandry gone wrong? Ah, the beauty of living in a tightly knit colonial community where every house shares scents and secrets like a game of telephone. But instead of words, it's mostly odors. And the truth is, when you're battling a midsummer heat wave, that shared aroma can very quickly turn into the great olfactory game called Guess Who's Cooking What? But back to the domestic delights of life here. Your day starts with you wandering through this rustic retreat, examining every imperfection, like it's a family member who needs tough love. Typically, families like yours would have the whole clan pitching in for chores, both indoors and out. Not to mention, a colonial home could be cozy, yes, but it was also a veritable petri dish of dirt and delightful pests. Ever tried to argue with a beetle over the last crumb of bread? And trust me, if you thought sharing a small apartment with roommates was bad, picture living in a one-room timber haven with the whole family and assorted livestock. Nothing says intimacy like sharing your sleeping space with a goat that snorts loudly through the night, believing itself to be a human. Seriously, snuggling up to the one with the warmest wool might just shift from affectionate to, how soon till I can make a coat out of this? Every object in this house was purposefully placed, but not without a sense of chaotic charm. The wooden table? Oh no, don't expect anything from the Pinterest board here. It's more likely an eclectic collection of saw marks and water rings than a flawless surface for dining. Before we get into the food, let's also mention the carefully placed hygienic features. Remember, this was a time when going to the bathroom was about as much fun as being chased by a swarm of angry bees. So naturally, the concept of a bathroom was akin to dreaming of owning a yacht. You could envision it, but only in the most fanciful daydreams. So you hop over to the potty corner. Yes, that's right, it's literally just a bucket submitted for public life. And it definitely requires a brave heart and a good pair of ostrich feathers to fan the subsequent odor away. Now you're left wondering, is this truly the life you dreamed of when you sang along to that live, laugh, love sign? From the timbered walls to the communal bucket, your colonial home has personality, much like that one friend who can't keep a secret but has a heart of gold. You lean in, willing to take the good with the bad because, deep down, you realize you can't make this up. Life in a hand-built colonial home teems with a sense of comfort and discomfort intertwined, like wearing socks with sandals, but classed up because it's made of timber and coarse wool after all. Suddenly, a cold breeze sweeps through the room, sending a shiver up your spine. Ah yes, the delightful reality of drafty timber walls.
where the wind gets its jollies by sneaking in and wrapping itself around you like an enthusiastic but unwanted hug. You think, well, this is cozy in the same way a frozen pizza can feel like a gourmet meal. You either have a wild sense of adventure, or it might just be the deep levels of denial kicking in. In your cozy, timber-formed fortress where reality mixes with quirky absurdity, you embrace the hilariously challenging life decisions of colonial living, like shrugging off the strangeness, or perhaps ordering a modern pizza delivery because, let's face it, sometimes even historical charm cannot justify a suspicious-looking meal served in a wooden trencher. So remember, every floorboard you tread, every wooden peg you see, is part of a grand tapestry of absurd survival. You navigate this bizarre universe of colonial America with joy, humor, and just a pinch of dignity. As you settle in, you realize that while the history may be rich, it's the absurdity that keeps your heart light and your laughter loud.
Chapter 15. The Wall's Wacky Wonders. Let's talk about the walls of your cozy little 1700s colonial home, a marvel of construction that somehow resembles a giant, unkempt craft project gone awry. Picture a great patchwork of woven wooden sticks, plastered together with a delightful concoction of mud, straw, and, yes, animal dung. That's right, you're living in a home with walls that make you question both your aesthetic choices and daily life choices all at once. Now, as you lean against one of these sturdy walls, you might wonder, why would anyone think this was a good idea? It's like cozying up to a really lumpy, unearthed potato sack left out in the rain. But let's not be too hasty in our judgments. This delightful mixture not only adds a certain aroma to your home, but also makes for some incredibly durable walls. After all, if the locals weren't going to build their homes just to withstand the elements, then what was the point of all that back-breaking labor? Imagine the skill that went into selecting those wooden sticks. I mean, you're not just randomly grabbing twigs. You want the straight ones, sort of like a dating app for lumber. And when you're sticking them into the ground, there's a moment of pride, like you've just crafted the world's worst sculpture. You think to yourself, this will hold up against raging storms and maybe even an angry neighbor. Now let's get to that delightful plaster. Can you smell it? Take a deep breath. Ah yes, the heady scent of mud mixed with straw, garnished with a hint of, what were they thinking? And let's not forget the mystique of animal dung, which was frequently used as a binding agent. Nothing screams home sweet home quite like the fragrance of the farmyard wafts permeating the air you breathe. It's like living in a perpetual olfactory puzzle. Is that my neighbor's stew simmering, or did I just get a face full of horse biscuits? And speaking of durable, remember the trials of your house against the elements? With walls made of this remarkable blend, you might as well call it the fortress of filth. Strong enough to withstand a bear attack, but charming enough that your dinner guests will feel firsthand the rustic roots of colonial life. In fact, neighbors would often come by, look at your humble abode, and say, "Wow, you really know how to embrace the aesthetic of bespoke animal fertilizer." For the most part, your walls do a commendable job of keeping out the rain. Or at least, they try. The wind howls, presenting a chilling sonnet as it creeps through those inevitable cracks, whispering sweet nothings while you shiver in your boots. Who needs an alarm clock when you have nature jolting you awake like an enthusiastic raccoon raiding your kitchen? There's just something about knowing you share your home with elements of surprise, like a creepy wood spirit or wayward squirrel looking for shelter. Now, let's address privacy, a concept that was as foreign to colonial life as a unicorn at the grocery store. With your house creaking and groaning like a ship at sea, every conversation could be easily overheard by the chickens scratching outside. You might find yourself asking, did Aunt Mildred really need to share that embarrassing story? What a catastrophic setup for family gatherings. Conversations echo through the room like obnoxious echoes, so you might just opt for more subtle hand gestures that leave your relatives blissfully unaware of your thoughts. But did you see how she poured that bacon grease? Ah, home maintenance and the tussle with decay.
Over time, those energetic little sides of your walls made of mud and dung might begin to do the cha-cha. Repairs were never glamorous, so you'd be stomping around, grabbing whatever rags, moss, and truly questionable herbs you could find, slapping them on for repairs that feel a little like offering a band-aid to a broken leg. But there's that rustic charm again. It's like getting a facial made of, well, dirt. Who needs an expensive spa day when you can rub mud all over your house? And speaking of touching the walls, remember when you were told not to touch things because they're dirty? Well, in your colonial life, touching the walls is a daily event. It's like a weird game of don't touch that, but it's also a game of survival. Just think of it as a more rustic Instagram filter, one that embraces everything chaotic and confusing. Like your life, really. As the sun sets, the shadows dance along your mud and straw walls, casting flickering patterns reminiscent of your partner's dance moves at the last wedding you attended. Awkward, yet oddly heartwarming. Each creak is a ghost of your long-lost sanity. Each draft a reminder that you must be ever vigilant against surprises lurking at the edges of your existence. In your home, every scratch, every odd scent, every wall embellishment, the good, the bad, and the truly bizarre, all remind you that this life is beautifully absurd, much like finding a rustic trend for an artisanal cafe. Within every crack in the wall is a tale, a wink of history, and a hearty laugh at what could only be described as the undeniable charm of colonial life. So remember, as you drift into slumber cradled by the wacky wonders of your colonial walls, that even in this ridiculous, dung-smelling reality, there's a thread of history woven into your very being. A thread that, like your home, holds it all together, beautifully chaotic and delightfully absurd. Chapter 16. The roof over your head, and the animals too. Ah, the ceiling above your head, both a shelter and a welcome mat for the local wildlife. As you admire that magnificent feat of engineering, a thatched roof made from layers of dried straw and reeds, you can't help but feel both impressed and mildly horrified. This ancient craft of waterproofing is a miracle of sorts, designed not just to keep the rain and snow at bay, but also to provide a delightful living arrangement for chickens, hay mice, and even the occasional raccoon with an appetite for adventure. Now, let's take a moment to bask in the sheer genius that is thatching. Woven tightly together, those strands of straw are Mother Nature's way of saying, why have a solid roof when you can have a tangle of plant life hanging out above your head? It's like decorating your home with crafty shiplap, except you have an infestation of nature that thinks your roof is a 5-star hotel. Did you see what was happening there too? That adorable robin could be making a nest right above your dinner table. How charming. Just imagine the gastronomic thrill of discovering tiny bird droppings as an unexpected seasoning in your stew. Bon appétit! The beauty of thatched roofs is that they can last decades, if you don't count the leaks, sagging, and the occasional motivational speech from a squirrel as it confidently looks down on your dinner party. Picture this: the cracks along the roof, where the straw has finally given in to the exhaustion of resisting the elements, allow water to seep inside. You, my friend, are now living in what can be best described as a primitive water feature. Can you feel the delightful drip, drip, drip on your forehead during those romantic candlelit dinners? It's like being serenaded by your home, a sweet warble of, oops, sorry about that. But let's dig, pun intended, into the structural integrity of your colonial roof. The layers of straw, while superb at repelling water, are meticulously crafted to sway with the wind, kind of like a dance party happening right above you. Every gust from outside sends that roof into a gentle jig, while you ponder if this is the way to inspire interior decor trends beyond just wall mud and hand-carved furniture. And what about those roofs of friends who've decided to drop by uninvited? Sure, it might seem charming to have a few extra critters in the house, but the reality is a bit more rotten. Imagine waking up to not just the sounds of nature, but the literal sounds of nature treating your attic like it's a 5-star resort. You thought the loud neighbor from across the street was bad? Try sharing space with a raccoon duo having a midnight snack of your leftover cornmeal. Just before your thoughts spiral into a surreal hurricane of furry nightmares, let's not forget that the ideal thatched roof is both art and science. Local artisans trained rigorously in straw weaving
techniques present themselves as the true celebrities of your colonial town. While your neighbor struggles with harvesting straw and simply owns it all, you, the savvy homeowner, are merely thankful you didn't hire anyone else to do it, because it turned out to be an elaborate money heist, leaving you with neither a roof nor livelihood. At least now you get to cement that DIY title into the history books. And let's not gloss over the delightful aroma wafting from above. Imagine the heady blend of nature that fills your nose each time the wind rustles those life-giving strands. Somewhere between fresh hay, the lingering scent of something slightly decomposing, and the occasional whiff of, is that last week's dinner? It's a lovely sensory experience, perfect for sending any house guests running for the hills. Are you starting to get the sense that this roof might just be a medieval way of keeping the world at arm's length? Or perhaps a method of confusing visitors into thinking they've wandered into the great outdoors? Now, if you were to speak to one of those brilliant craftsmen who've conquered the art of thatching, you'd understand their loyalty to straw and reeds is like a lifeline. Or, more accurately, the life preserver amidst a sea of mildew that threatens to claim all your damp dreams. Can you replicate this roof without a raccoon roommate? You'd ask. They'd chuckle and respond, only if you can juggle 7 live chickens while standing on one leg and reciting the history of hay. The truth is, your thatched abode is not only a roof over your head, but also a microcosm of existence, a drama unfolding in colors and textures you never knew existed. As you lay beneath it, rustling and creaking, you almost become part of its story, swaying gently to the rhythms of nature. Each droplet of rain that announces itself like an uninvited guest echoes through your thoughts. Is that a leaky roof or a chorus of unpaid performers? So, as you explore the elegant absurdity of daily life in your colonial world, take comfort in knowing that while the roof may be less than glamorous, it certainly has its own brand of charm, one drop at a time. Now, as you nestle in for the evening, just remember that those layers of straw above are doing their best, and they might just be putting on a hot show of human resilience mixed with a little animal flair. Chapter 17. The Cramped Symphony of Family Life in a One-Room Home. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mildly Interesting History. Today, we dive into something almost as cozy as your ex's relentless streaming of romantic comedies at 3 a.m., the delightful chaos of daily life in colonial America. But let's be clear, this is not your Pinterest-perfect version of family togetherness. No scented candles, no Netflix marathons, just a whole lot of folks crammed into a small, multi-purpose room, where intimacy meant something much closer to we're all sharing the same chores and smells. Imagine you've just puffed out a heavy breath in the early 1700s, and congratulations! You've now upgraded from your own living room to a single, shared space with your entire extended family, their pets, and possibly even a few stray chickens who think they're part of the family. Spoiler alert, they're not. As you settle in for the evening, prepare to bask in the comforting warmth of, well, togetherness. Have you ever tried to sleep while sharing your personal space with a goat? Yes? Welcome to the club. Before we delve into this charming habitat, let's call it the room. How many of you have ever found yourself in a situation where you wished you had more space? Like the time you thought inviting 5 friends over for dinner was a solid plan until everyone ended up alphabetically positioned in your tiny kitchen. Imagine that multiplied by a dozen for an entire family, a plethora of food smells you didn't know existed, and spontaneous debates over who gets to sleep on the less scratchy straw tonight. And did I mention everyone also shares the same air? Did anyone remember to air it out after the day of work and, well, everything else? Let's take a moment to grasp the dazzling array of activities happening within the room. First, the soothing ambience of children's laughter mingles with the somewhat fragrant aroma of last night's stew simmering for breakfast. Call it a poorly executed, leftover wellness plan, wrapped in a nice colonial touch of, at least we're all still here. The bubbling pot that's now both a nutritional wonder and a sneaky breeding ground for a few local, albeit small, pest families. And speaking of scents, oh, the aromatic harmony. It's like living inside a fine wine cask, but not the refined sort. You've got lingering fish odors from last week's family catch, freshly baked bread, which is actually just baking bread while the other half is trying to avoid becoming bread scraps, and, of course, the unvarnished scent of your family's own personal hygiene situation, which, let's say, could use some work. Ever tried to sprinkle perfume on a goat? If you think an air freshener would solve this problem, dream on. You're playing hide and seek with the local farm animals while praying for ventilation, as the dining room, kitchen, and bedroom are
All the same. One room.
The family dynamics are a spectacle in themselves. As you flick your gaze around the cramped space, there's Aunt Bessie trying to knead dough while keeping your cousin Timothy from drowning the pot by practicing his best impression of a fish, splashing water everywhere. With the requisite amount of emotional dexterity, you might find yourself simultaneously mediating negotiations over the best straw for sleeping that night. And by negotiations, I mean it's a knockdown, drag-out fight being held in hushed tones, because Grandma is trying to catch a quick nap in the corner. How charming it is to have your disagreement while balancing a bucket of laundry that's perched perilously upon the only available chair. Now, what about meals? Brace yourself. Gathering for breakfast isn't quite like the wholesome family rituals depicted on TV. Nope. You all sit down, or rather huddle close together, to enjoy your well-rounded breakfast of porridge thick enough to stand a spoon up in, sometimes dubbed a hearty surprise. Feel free to chew. But let's be honest. Did the cow put a deposit down for the whole family? Or do we just casually pretend we don't notice where half the milk decided to end up? The joy of sharing space is heaped with generous helpings of each other's breakfast choices, including an array of local bugs that have mistakenly joined the feast. As you gather around the family table, crafted from the thickest tree you could find within a 3-mile radius, everyone flocks together for the day's agenda. Will you be tackling chores? Or is it simply your turn to watch the goats while debating the merits of bathing versus enduring the stench of survival? The latter, as discussed, quickly wins. Bathing involves hauling water from the nearest well, which, as you realize, involves ritualistic feats of strength that can only inspire awe in future generations. For now, the rustic charm of daily inequality mingles with the gentle chaos of shared human experiences. In moments of reflection, the stress of cramped spaces fades as laughter emerges from the chaos and conversations wind in unexpected directions. These shared struggles create bonds, fragile yet resilient as a string of twine. After all, it's anyone's guess how many times Uncle Dave has tried to sneak peas into desserts, or whether Cousin Jenny has finally figured out how to avoid the goat's affection during evening storytelling. So, when you finally nestle down at night into that bed which also doubles as a dining table, because, let's face it, even the furniture is in on the cheerless fun, take comfort in knowing that even amidst all the multi-purpose mayhem, you are, in essence, woven into the very fabric of existence. As crackling embers fade into sleep and the hodgepodge of mattress stuffing beneath you squeaks with each movement, remember, at least you're not sharing the same straw as a raccoon tonight. It's smooth chaos that makes one wonder how future generations will fill their homes. But for now, it's just you, your family, and a wonderland of shared yesterdays. Ah, life in colonial America. A beautiful mess that makes you cherish your own modern space, fuzzy socks, and the exquisite silence of lonely evenings filled with nothing but the sound of your favorite show. Sweet dreams. Chapter 18. The solitary wooden structure and its cold, unsanitary reality. Let's talk about privies, shall we? In the early 1700s, a privy stood bustling with as much character as the loudest family member yelling about their potato soup recipe. And yet, no one ever mentioned how it should have its own dedicated Instagram account for best cozy outdoor lounges. But rather than the picturesque setting of a forest cafe, you had a wooden, rickety structure standing far away from the main house, like it was hiding from all the poor hygiene choices made within. Picture it, perched in a field, as solitary as an introvert at a roaring 20s party, cold, uninviting, and surrounded by the sounds of nature's unfiltered bacteria. Oh yes, this wasn't just any filthy outdoor toilet. This was colonial America's take on a mildly horrid experience. Every morning, as you peered into the sun coming up, if it was indeed a sunny day, you felt a wave wash over you, alternating between dread and a fierce determination to simply go. At least you didn't have to carry a bucket of water to wash your hands afterward. Because, let's be honest, no one was washing anything, really. Ever wondered what it was like to balance your dignity while managing nature's most pressing call? Let's begin the journey to our lovely wooden throne. Trepidation fills every step towards the privy, the cool morning air biting at your exposed ankles. The scent of fresh grass mingles with something else faint but pungent. Oh yes, the aroma of human nature at its finest, wafting through the creaky wooden door. Imagine cracking the door open, revealing a masterful 4-plank construction, one that ensured a half-hearted attempt at privacy. This delightfully cramped little sanctuary wouldn't inspire even the hardiest of poet laureates. No, it was more like something from a horror movie, except the only monsters lurking were the uninvited guests, also known as flies. They buzzing around like they owned the place, while you awkwardly maneuvered for proper positioning that would be entirely too complicated to explain over Sunday dinner. Great Uncle Timmy, can I interest you in a role play of what it's like to answer nature's call while dodging flies? As you settled in, perhaps there was a fleeting thought about that time your cousin tried to convince you that avoiding the privy was tantamount to bold living. Ha! Boldness doesn't cure pressure, it just delays the inevitable. This was not your backyard treehouse with imaginative prospects. You weren't getting away with merely pretending. No, cousins. You were here, with just you, your conscience, and the questionable construction of latrines passed down from generations. And while you were sprinkled with fresh morning anxiety, the sounds of distant laughter in the main house seemed mocking. Did they not hear your soft yet definitely terminal internal monologue? A little patience, that's all you need. Someone had to have experienced this before, probably everyone in your entire familial orbit. Yet still, they freely recounted the privy's merits as if it were a come-hither postcard. "Ah, yes, you'll love it," they would say, eyes twinkling. "It's the best way to exclaim your thoughts and desires." Did they mean imminent thoughts about how filthy the whole affair was? No amount of enthusiastic adjectives could turn a wooden box over a patch of mud into anything resembling glamorous. The structure itself could provide tales recounting who last passed the threshold. Tune into the epic saga of Cousin Betty, who perhaps, after an unfortunate encounter, ended up lobbying outside the door, teetering towards a completely different set of bushes. "This?" she exclaimed. "You mean this supposed comfort station?" Yet, as you leaned forward with a precarious grip, the unsanitary reality hit home. Ever played a game of bathroom roulette? One tiny miscalculation, and it's game over. Honestly, the wooden seat was completely free of, any modern innovations like sanitization or the most basic form of cleanliness. It's not as if Grandma popped by weekly for a deep clean. Rinse cycles? Not in the 1700s.
If the seat threatened a splinter in your rear, well, say goodbye to your spiffy colonial breeches. But alas, when you finally emerged from this odyssey, pride danced lightly upon your shoulders like a shimmery colonial dress, albeit with the befuddlement of a love story gone awry. The cold air rushed past you like a thank you note to the elements. At least you survived a monumental moment of relief. Your humble wooden structure felt like a souvenir of valor. As you made your way back to the festivities, a certain peace settled within. You felt like a hero embarking on a noble quest after taming a wild beast, all while the livestock raised an eyebrow at your sour-faced triumph. Is it morning already? You might wonder, astonished, while dodging your aunt's latest casserole concoction simmering with family love. Or merely a reminder of culinary limitations through the ages. And in this picturesque state of revelation, perhaps, just maybe, you regretlessly discovered that even those who lived in a fancy hovel among the stacked straw knew their harsh realities. Yes, living in early colonial America had its charms, but amidst the communal closeness that meant sharing everything, toilet trips could have used a tad more spritz of respect. So buckle up, my fellow time traveler. You're about to engage in humor that lingers like last week's stew, as we wander through the colorful tapestry of colonial life and its unsanitary adventures. Sanitary.
Chapter 19. A Chamber Pot's Adventure in Colonial Chaos. Let's transport ourselves to a bustling street in a colonial city in the early 1700s. The sun hangs lazily above as traders hawk their wares with the energy of caffeine-fueled squirrels. It's a delightful cacophony of chatter, laughter, and, well, a touch of the unsavory. Imagine, if you will, the air thick with the mingling scents of freshly baked bread, thrown in livestock scents, and the faint yet unmistakable odor of something far more alarming, drifting casually through the streets. As you stroll along, feeling mildly optimistic that today won't involve too many unspeakable incidents, you witness an absolute spectacle unfolding before your very eyes. Right above you, an old wooden window creaks open, and suddenly, it feels like someone has just declared war against the laws of hygiene. Out comes a chamber pot, practically flinging its contents like a confetti cannon gone rogue. The slosh could have rivaled a poorly executed splash zone at a water park. Just to clarify, this is not the majestic moment when you're reminded of spring showers nourishing the ground. No, this is a cavalcade of history that involves varied shades of liquid and solid waste raining down upon the unsuspecting street like some overzealous Roman festival gone wrong. The sound? Ah yes, a splash, followed by a unified gasp from all those unfortunate enough to be directly below. You glance to your left, where a small crowd has gathered, diverse in their reactions. A baker with a loaf of bread frozen mid-motion, a lady sneezing and perhaps reconsidering her decision to stand so close, and a curious goat, completely unfazed by the commotion and more concerned with nibbling straw. This is daily life in colonial America, folks. You may find yourself pondering the foundational question of the day. Why did early Americans feel the need to empty their chamber pots out the window? Did they believe in some sort of random toilet lottery system? Perhaps it was a social experiment meant to build character. Ah yes, young James, tonight's lesson, dodge flying waste like a professional. Let's go deeper into this urban phenomenon. As you stroll closer, you can observe the brave souls wandering through the delightful, odorous chaos, forever dodging chamber pot missiles with the grace of someone who spent a little too much time on the tavern dance floor. It's a cocktail of creativity and community, where the townspeople have basically figured out that life in colonial America means navigating a perpetual game of leapfrog over urine and excrement. Who needs modern parks and recreational areas when the streets serve as your very own obstacle course? Close your eyes for a moment, but, don't actually close them too long, or you might miss the spectacle. Can you hear the faint crinkle of old newspapers used for commerce, sparking an unexpected bout of humor?
penny for your thoughts, or
Perhaps a penny for your dodging practice? You feel a slight shiver as the aroma wafts toward you, landing somewhere between an unpleasant reminder of last night's feast and a curious invitation to join whatever is going on. Now imagine the local gossip taking flight. Did you see Mary? Blessed with the agility of a cat? How did she dodge 3 chamber pots before breakfast? In a community where hygiene and decorum hinge precariously on the edge of what can be deemed socially acceptable, humor becomes survival. You'd need a sharp wit and a solid pair of boots. Sticky soles keep the spirit grounded, or at least stuck firmly to the cobblestones. And of course, you can't overlook the chamber pots themselves. These delightful contraptions are often constructed of clay, ceramic, or even fine china, depending on one's standing in society. That's right, fancier the pot, more directly related to waste you get. So much for keeping up with the Joneses. When was the last time your heirloom china took a hit from the second floor? Talk about a family heirloom now completed with an interesting splash. But let's not be too harsh on our chamber pot-wielding neighbors. In a time when personal hygiene barely managed a sitcom level of laughs, community spirit flourished through camaraderie. The old adage might have been, "What goes around, comes around." But in colonial times, more realistically, it was, "What comes out could get you a chuckle," or perhaps something worse. Now picture an artisan at work, deftly wielding their craft tools, while simultaneously keeping one eye on the chamber pots flinging themselves about like wayward children on a sugar high. Why yes, I'll get to carving that beautiful wooden duck soon enough, right after avoiding a hazardous project on human dynamics in the waste world. In this chilly block of colonial life, neighbors unite under the shared experience of dodging personal refuse unleashed by their own kin, perhaps bonding over the day's potpourri of surprises. Therefore, sure, you may wake up tomorrow hoping for a new adventure, but instead, it could just be another day spent bearing witness to the beautiful, unvarnished mess that makes life so spectacularly absurd. So, dear traveler of the colonial streets, whether you're avoiding energetic chamber pots or simply pondering the nature of humanity through its finest messes, it's clear that comedic relief was everywhere, even in early 18th century America, where everyone had to ask themselves, to dodge or not to dodge? And in the grand tapestry of life, where unsanitary moments meet uncanny humor, each segment of our life should remind you that sometimes the most interesting adventures arise from the most unexpected places. And who knows, maybe tomorrow, that chamber pot just might give you a standing ovation. Chapter 20. The Dreaded Basin of Colonial Hygiene. Let's talk about bathing, or rather, the lack thereof. In the early 1700s, when the air was filled with the scent of chamber pot calamities and far too many livestock, personal hygiene was less about cleanliness and more about avoiding outright public condemnation. So you wake up in your wooden shack, which has presumably been inherited from the time when the earth was still cooling. And guess what? It's time for some good old-fashioned washing. Well, sort of. As you reach for your damp cloth, let's call it your regrettable face-washing companion, you can't help but notice how its texture resembles that of a well-used dish rag gone rogue. Yes, in colonial America, a clean face was optional, but the damp, sticky-smelling rag, that was a daily essential, probably more from sheer necessity than actual sanitation protocols. You sit on the edge of your straw-stuffed bed, eyeing your small basin, which isn't quite a spa-worthy hot tub, but more of a glorified tin can. Filled with cold, often dubious water that's been sitting there since who knows when, or possibly collected from the last rainfall that also washed away your neighbor's dowry. You muster the courage to get started. As you dip the damp cloth into the frigid abyss, remember, it's all about perspective. You could be washing your face in a cow trough, while at least you've upgraded to a ba and rather than a bucket.
Small victories, folks. With the cloth in hand, you take a deep breath. Soothing scents? Well, let's redefine that as the fragrant notes of earthy, wet wool mixed with a hint of your own existential dread. And as you wipe your face, you're keenly aware that you're engaging in a ritual that could easily qualify as more of a slapstick comedy routine than any existing beauty regime. Ever tried to clean your armpits with cold soup? No? You're not missing out. But this? It's a close second. As you furrow your brow while scrubbing, just like the fashion-forward folks of this era did, you realize something horrifying. Lathering soap is an elusive luxury reserved for the well-to-do. Your only hope of smelling fresher than your goat is a paltry offering of lye soap, which is as much an ally in your quest for cleanliness as a foghorn on a silent lake. You can't help but wonder, did people ever ponder the deep philosophical question of how colonial hygiene turned into a game of which smell is worse, unwashed bodies or whatever that is? Now let's take a moment to appreciate the precariousness of this hygienic endeavor. You're perched on the cusp of discovery as you dash the damp rag across your forehead, half laughing, half crying. A laugh erupts from the neighbor's yard, probably one of the more adventurous children dodging chamber pots. Wait, is that the sound of joy? You muse. Or someone's face just met the view of my washing basin. Not to mention,
Hygiene was not widely regarded as a critical aspect of community fellowship. Forget about wellness workshops. Instead, it was more about a gentle hinting from your neighbor that perhaps today might be an excellent day for, changing clothes. Your attempts to scrub away the layers of previous weeks would go unnoticed, kind of like your hopes and dreams after trying to wrangle all your laundry. Is this the part where we delve into the glorious pastime of hair washing? Spoiler, it's a myth. Why wash hair when biting bugs and leftover bits of yesterday's meal will do nicely? Was probably a conversation starter around the fire. Your locks might just become a habitat for those delighted little friends we lovingly call lice. Ah yes, where else would you find nature's gifts preserved with a hint of healthy skepticism toward personal grooming? You pause. What kind of shampoo do they have? You might ponder. Oh no, wait. Shampoo is a fever dream for the elite. They likely used whatever leaves fell from the neighbor's tree or cursed the weather for the entire process. In short, hair care was essentially free-spirited chaos encapsulated in a bad dream, mingling with agricultural refuse. So you feel quite accomplished with your quick wash, knowing that you have navigated your way through this essential aspect of colonial living. Not only are you slightly fresher, but now you're also ready to tackle the next layer of daily life in a world that defines personal cleanliness as take a quick sweep with a damp rag and pray for the best. Next, you could even consider brushing your teeth, although let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are lines even you might not be willing to cross. And as you finally finish this unparalleled hybrid of a face wash, you glance into your tin basin. The water has now taken on colors that could only be defined by your adventurous dining habits over the last week. So this is personal hygiene in colonial America, a strange mix of hope, hesitation, and the acceptance that sometimes less is more, especially on those cleaning days that defy rational expectations. But don't worry. To put it gently, there's always tomorrow to reconsider your strategy, though it likely won't involve luxury, soap, or smelling like anything outside of goats and lye. Such was the communal face-off of life's unvarnished reality, the kind that forces one to embrace humor, a fair share of germs, and a mindset that laughter truly is the best medicine. Chapter 21, A Day at the Forge, where sweat meets mirth. Let's talk about blacksmithing. Picture this. You step outside your modest abode, still steeped in the warmth of your questionable face-washing experience, and are greeted by a heat that could make a summer in the Sahara feel like Antarctica. Welcome to the lively chaos of a blacksmith's forge in the early 1700s, where the air is thick with the smell of burning coal and the sweet, sweet sounds of metal clanging. If you can hear the rhythm of hammers echoing like a musical symphony of sweat and toil, congratulations, you're not in a concert hall, you've just stumbled into a metal-bending paradise. Now, take a moment to tilt your head and squint at the fiery spectacle. A muscular blacksmith stands before you, wielding a hammer with a gleam in his eye and muscles that seem to have been sculpted for this very task. It's like watching a slightly less graceful ballet dancer perform his greatest hits, but instead of pirouettes, he's whipping heavy pieces of iron into submission. The glow of molten metal seems like it could create a disco ball effect if you squint just right. Who needs lights in a colonial tavern when you have the blacksmith's forge, a natural disco, just with more soot? As you ponder the thought of a soot-dusted dance party, your attention is pulled back to the forge. The clang of iron against iron rings like a loud alarm clock, reminding you that being a blacksmith isn't all fun and games. No, sir. It involves fierce heat that could turn your eyebrows into bacon and an arms workout that would leave Olympic weights jealous. But all that muscle has its purpose. What exactly is this burly artisan crafting, you wonder? The answer might surprise you. Tools, horseshoes, and a rather unsettling number of weaponry for the local militia. Yes, even a few extra pointy things for that neighbor with a penchant for arguments over fence lines. You gaze in awe as he raises a fiery rod of iron that looks more like an angry snake than a piece of metal. The air is saturated with the tantalizing aroma of burning coal mixed with a hint of something deeply unsettling, probably your neighbor's livestock, who may or may not be trying to form a protest outside your home for their late feed. In this bustling realm of hammers and glowing coals, every object has a story, even if it's painfully dull and mostly involves, "I hammered it a lot until it became this." Ever thought about how blacksmiths are effectively the medieval version of modern-day personal trainers? You muse. Except their clients are horses and misbehaving plows. You can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Sure, blacksmiths didn't need Instagram accounts to showcase their before and after transformations. They just needed a smudge of soot on their faces and a good story about how they barely avoided a molten iron accident last Tuesday. But this life isn't all glamour and forged metal. Just think about it. Working near a forge means day after day of sweat-soaked limbs and frequent trips to the village well, where your neighbors delightfully remind you how nice their wash basins could feel against your soot-encrusted skin. "I'll take a bucket for my daily scrub, please," you might shout, wishing to not be judged while recounting your daily dose of blacksmith glam. Moving along, the blacksmith's anvil, his beloved companion, bears the scars of many battles. Its face is well worn, engraved with impressions of 1,000,000 strikes, like an ancient relic from a time before selfies were crafted. If only this anvil could talk, you ponder, it would probably complain about having worked more overtime than I ever will in my life. Ah, but here's where the charm of the forge enters the fray. Amid the relentless category of burning and banging, you notice a small boy, practically a sidekick to the blacksmith. He's hard at work, furiously attempting to imitate the grand poobah of metal. While he seems to possess all the finesse of a three-legged goat on roller skates, his unwavering determination is mesmerizing. His tiny arms swing at the hot metal with a passion fueled by perhaps half a loaf of bread and a particularly enthusiastic desire to impress the town's allowance-giving parents. Yet, if you think blacksmithing is merely about the hammering and the sweat, think again. When the sun retires for the day, the forge transforms into a community hub. Villagers stop by, and between hearty laughs and stories of the day, they swap tales filled with more absurdity than actual substance. "Oh, did you hear about Bedivere's cow? It got stuck in a fence and now thinks it owns the pasture." Laughter echoes through the air, warming you more than the forge ever could. A sweet, obligatory reminder that laughter is often the best balm for any sore muscles after a long day of blacksmithing. So, as the fiery glow dims and the sun starts to hibernate behind the horizon, you realize that despite the oppressive heat, the clang of metal, and the persistent smells, the forge embodies the spirit of the community. It's where metal meets mirth, and every twist of the iron tells stories of resilience, camaraderie, and a smidge of human folly, which, let's face it, is just another day in colonial America. As the day comes to a close, you take one last look at this life, this spectacle of sweat and fire. Instead of worry about your own chaotic laundry situation back at home, you embrace the absurdity of it all, and perhaps find solace in the firelight. After all, in a world where hygiene is considered an optional hobby, you've just been reminded that laughter, just like a well-forged horseshoe, can carry a heavy load. Chapter 22. Moving the Milk. The Art of Colonial Cow Taming. Let's talk about milking. Picture this: a quiet morning in early 1700s colonial America. The sun stretching its arms through the trees like a sleepy toddler reluctantly waking up for preschool. You're nestled in a small wooden abode that has been expertly crafted with all the finesse of a drunk raccoon. That's right, it's rustic charm, folks. And as you step outside, you're instantly greeted by the delightful aroma of cow. Yes, that distinct scent that ensures your nostrils are never truly free of odor. But behold, you are not alone. Right there, nestled under a dauntingly large oak tree, sits a woman on a sturdy, low wooden stool, her feet firmly planted on the straw-strewn ground with the confidence of someone who accurately predicted the weather for the next 3 weeks. She's milking a smaller, temperamental cow, affectionately dubbed Bessie by the locals. This cow possesses a spirit that can only be described as part diva, part stampede. Think of a slightly snobbish, marshmallow-flavored bull with an attitude problem. As you observe from your vantage point, it's clear. This woman's arms work in a rhythm that would put a clock's gears to shame. Squeeze, pull, repeat, a mantra of sorts, tailored for the demanding art of milk extraction. The wooden bucket beneath her slowly fills with the precious liquid, a veritable gold mine in a world where fresh dairy is as rare as a modern-day plumber in the 1700s. Ever thought about milking cows while wearing a dress that has more layers than a wedding cake? You muse, as she deftly maneuvers around Bessie's occasional kicks, which could only be intercepted by the reflexes of a highly trained ninja. I can nearly hear you wondering if you'd prefer a day of sitting on a damp stool trying to coax milk from a cantankerous beast, or tackling the challenges of a modern-day office job. Spoiler: both leave you questioning your life choices. The serene morning is often disrupted by Bessie's melodramatic moos, which, quite frankly, sound more like a cow auditioning for a Broadway show. "Bessie, we all know you're the star of the show," the woman might chuckle. Not that Bessie could care less about the praise. In her eyes, she's just a victim of circumstance. An absolute injustice, you inform yourself, while cringing at the thought of having to deal with a bovine diva on a daily basis. And what's that? The unique amalgamation of fresh hay, a hint of mud, and a sprinkle of what could best be described as the light essence of farm life swirls around you. It's not exactly the aromatherapy they sell in fancy spas, but you could argue it effectively grounds you in the vibrancy of the rural world. Who needs lavender when you have the heady perfume of livestock? Meanwhile, as you immerse yourself in the scene, you can't help but wonder how this woman manages to keep her composure while juggling farm life and the highest form of bovine diplomacy. Ever tried negotiating with a cow that clearly believes it should be paid in more treats for its labor? The thought paints a vivid picture: cow cookies being exchanged like rare commodities, while the rest of the farm watches in rapt attention. Bessie might just be the largest diva in the animal kingdom, mastering the fine art of, "Look at me, I deserve a raise." When the milking is finally done, cue the triumphant fanfare from an imaginary orchestra. The bucket brims with milk that could hopefully be turned into cheese, butter, or whatever dairy dream her family requires. Meanwhile, Bessie ruminates on her newfound fame, probably contemplating her future as a cow influencer. As she finishes the task, there's a palpable shift in quality of life. Life's simple joys, you think?
pondering whether technological advancements really have improved your existence. Sure, you can scroll through countless videos of a cat playing the piano, but can you transcend that experience to know the deep satisfaction of wrestling with a cow while dodging a kick? It's a fine line between frustration and personal growth, you realize, one that separates you from an epic tale worthy of a poorly made reality show, where everyone involved likely signed an unreasonable waiver. After all, there's something oddly comforting about the routine of milking. There's a space for dignity, resilience, and humor when life hands you an ill-tempered animal, and it's infused with the spirit of community. You see, when Bessie kicked, her owner would turn to the neighboring farmers and proclaim, "That one's got a real personality." There's a facepalm moment for you there. Who knew cows could be the local comedians in a rural community? At long last, with her duties fulfilled, the woman lets out a triumphant sigh, proving that surviving the rigors of daily farm life is no small feat. As you take one last look at her, you can't help but think about how, in the grand scheme of life, just like your coworkers in an office, a little laughter can make even the most frustrating of circumstances bearable. So as you drift further into imagination's embrace, consider this. If you think your morning commute is mundane, spare a thought for the woman on that stool, grappling with a cow's questionable temperament while narrowly escaping a strategically aimed kick. Because in this world, that's just another regular Tuesday.
Chapter 23. Scythe-Raising Achievements. The Perils of Colonial Wheat Harvesting. Hey guys, tonight we're about to embark on an adventure that's as exciting as watching paint dry, with a hint of danger and a side of sweaty brows. Strap in, because we're diving into the grueling reality of daily life in early 1700s Colonial America. It's like if your least favorite high school gym class was turned into a historically accurate survival game. So, as the sun rises, lifting its golden face above the fields like an over-caffeinated rooster, you might be asking yourself, what is it like to cut down wheat with a scythe and a prayer? How soon before your arms turn to jelly? And what's the chance you'll accidentally perform an impromptu interpretive dance with that dangerously curved blade? All important questions, and trust me, answering them is just the beginning. So, dim your lights, fire up your imaginary fans, and get comfortable in your cozy cocoon of blankets. Today, you're not just a passive listener. You've entered the era of hard labor and questionable clothing choices. Picture yourself there, in the thick of it, sweating like you've just participated in a medieval sweat lodge with nothing but a scythe to your name and a field of wheat awaiting your questionable skills. Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1720, where the sun is blazing and your job description is perfectly summed up in 2 words: wheat slaughter. Let's talk about the scene. You're standing in a sun-drenched field, surrounded by a group of fellow harvesters. Everyone is bent over, jockeying for position, wielding scythes with the grace of ballet dancers, if those dancers were under the influence of one too many pints of ale. The sun beats down irresponsibly, like a mother who refuses to acknowledge it's time for the kids to come inside. The earthy scent of freshly cut grass hangs in the air, mingling with a whiff of sweat that could probably be bottled and sold as eau de colonial courage. You're not leaping around like an elf in a fairy glen. No, this is more of a hardcore game of avoid the accidentally severed limb. Each swing of the scythe is a calculated risk, a beautiful dance of blade and body that could either yield a pile of golden wheat or an impromptu trip to the next world. Have you ever swung a tool heavy enough to double as a medieval weapon? If you thought putting IKEA furniture together was challenging, just wait until you try to cut down a field of wheat while bending over like an old man with a bad back. Your arms will ache in ways you didn't know were possible, reminding you that those arm workout videos are a cruel joke played by your fitness instructor. "Just swing harder," they'd cheer, while you contemplate a career in the fine art of doing absolutely nothing. The rhythm is surprisingly hypnotic. Swing, step, gather. Swing, step, gather.
It would almost feel meditative, if it weren't for
the constant risk of colliding with your neighbor's scythe and initiating what I can only describe as colonial karate. Imagine two people coming face to face with sharp tools. Your mind races. Does anyone have a first aid kit? And there you are, drenched in sweat, beads rolling down your face like races of panic. And suddenly, the joke's on you. There's a loud snap. A nearby worker has somehow managed to swing his scythe into a particularly rebellious weed. The sudden sound ricochets through the field, and you can't help but raise an eyebrow. Sure, you're all here for the communal experience, but this isn't a game of lawn darts. You're here to do some serious wheat business. Now, as your arms tire, you may start to wonder, is it or isn't it? Is this laborious task better or worse than answering emails for a living? Sure, you could argue that staring at a glowing screen might feel like a 21st century punishment, yet at least the most dangerous thing you could encounter is a low battery warning. Here, the greatest peril is either a scythe mishap or perhaps an unkind comment about your straw hat, which, let's be real, isn't doing you any favors. But finally, after what feels like a lifetime of swinging and swatting at the sun, the ritual comes to a close. You might lay down your trusty scythe, glistening in wheat-covered glory, and look over your day's labor, a proud mound of wheat that could feed your entire village, or make a particularly impressive crow tribute. And yet, when the sun begins its lazy descent, you can't help but feel a touch of gratitude. You survived. So, what have we learned today? Whether it's the thrill of tying knots in a long piece of twine, the majestic grace of a scythe swing, or simply the existential dread of watching your body give up without warning, Colonial America certainly knew how to test one's endurance. As you finally step back from that field of wheat and perhaps share a chuckle with your fellow workers about that close call with a rogue swing, you realize the real serial killer here wasn't the wheat, but the adorable, yet slightly terrifying, colonial lifestyle. So as you close your eyes now, let the echoes of that day drift away, knowing that your loyalty to scythe swings has been duly noted and ironically celebrated right before you sail off into dreamland, hopefully with a sharp scythe in sight and no injuries in mind. Good night, dear harvesters. Chapter 24. Spin Doctors. The whirligig of colonial wool production. Hey guys, tonight we're about to dive into something more intricate than your high school crush's diary. And trust me, it's also a lot scratchier. We're stepping into the world of colonial wool production, where women operate wooden spinning wheels, turning raw fibers into practical threads while mastering the art of making a delightful hum that could drown out an overdramatic theater performance. Get ready, because this journey might just be odder than finding a moldy piece of bread in the back of your kitchen cupboard. So, before we get tangled up in the fibers of early 1700s colonial America, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, but only if this tickles your historical funny bone, of course. Now, while you settle into your peaceful den or cozy nest of blankets, I bet you're wondering some critical questions. How many sheep did it take for a single woman to look like a woolly mammoth? Was the iconic spinning wheel the original home entertainment system, or did the real drama unfold during tea breaks? And how many times did the word bobbin sound remarkably like a character in a bad romance novel? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1720, where cotton is just a fantasy, wool is the wonder fabric, and every woman in the room has about as much chance of staying clean as a cat at an oil spill. Picture yourself in the heart of a colonial home, where the air carries the delightful aroma of sheep sweat mixed with a robust hint of your neighbor's burnt supper. Welcome to a realm where everyone has a job that's both laborious and unglamorous, and your primary role is to transform unkempt fleece into garments that have roughly the same comfort level as being hugged by a cactus. You're standing beside a large wooden spinning wheel that looks almost like a relic from an ancient alien spaceship. Meanwhile, the constant humming from the wheel is reminiscent of a well-meaning but off-key choir practice. Staring down at that pedal, you might feel like you've just entered a colonial version of a Cirque du Soleil performance gone terribly wrong. As you delicately draw out raw fibers, let's admit it, they resemble the attic's long-lost cat hair collection. You can feel that satisfying resistance. Everything feels alive, but that might just be the soul of the wool bemoaning its fate. A bright memory dances through your mind. Ah, the magic of turning fluff into fabric. Except that magic involves endless hours of your life dedicated to something that looks suspiciously akin to a giant hamster wheel. The wheel spins furiously, and you hear the gentle thrum of the wooden frame as it fights back against the fibers, all while you valiantly attempt to twist them into a lovely and continuous thread. You consider if that's what they meant by threading the needle, the only needle in this situation being the metaphorical one of sanity. The goal? To create thread so strong that it could probably tie together the world's worst relationships. Now let's talk about the technique you're probably going to develop while spinning. It involves a confusing ballet of your feet, hands, and perhaps a candid moment with gravity. You might find yourself flipping through your mental Rolodex of safety hazards. Is it gauche to use my foot to maintain balance? Should I be howling with determination or trying to channel the spirit of a woolly supervisor? Your fingers dip into the fibers, feeling a mixture of softness and stubbornness. It's almost as if the wool is judging your craftsmanship, silently asking, "Do you think you're up to the task? Are you? Well, let's see how your knees hold up after 2 hours of this dance." If you happen to lose focus, which you undoubtedly will, because who wouldn't get distracted by thoughts of the ideal pancake recipe, you might find yourself in a sudden whirlpool of wool. This sewing machine of antiquity is more finicky than your modern espresso machine on a Monday morning. One misstep, and suddenly you're facing an epic battle against a tangle that could probably rival any bad hair day you've ever had. And goodness knows, while the rhythmic twisting seems meditative, one moment of inattention can lead to something akin to a woolen crime scene, leaving you with a panic-inducing disaster that would have made even Houdini shudder. As the day drags on, the sun begins to set, casting a warm glow reminiscent of magic hour on Instagram. Except you realize that the only filter available is a grime filter. As you finally find your groove, spinning thread with the elegance of a swan, but the grace of a toddler on roller skates, you wonder, will you have created the revolutionary outfit that changes colonial fashion forever? Or end up with a starter pack of futuristic cat toys? At the end of this perilous journey through woolly mayhem, you'll step back, feeling somewhat accomplished and just a tad wool-brained. Glancing at a pile of thread that seems to mock you, your mind playfully muses, "Is this worth it?" Spoiler alert, probably not. But as always, there's a unique kind of peace that comes from tackling tasks that people are still trying to modernize. Just remember, the original hashtag of their struggle was wool not cool. So as you gently drift off into slumber, let the echoes of spinning wheels and disgruntled sheep lull you into a deep sleep, invoking a peace woven with threads of humor and a faint whiff of said sheep. Good night, you merry makers of filament and fluff. Chapter 25. Candlelight Confessions, a flickering glow in Colonial America. Hey guys, tonight we're about to delve into something darker than your morning coffee brew. The world of illumination in early Colonial America. Yes, we're entering an age where lighting your home was more of a gladiatorial wrestling match with a flaming wick than a cozy evening ritual. Now, before you panic and think you've accidentally wandered into a horror movie, let's remember that this charming little era is just teeming with tales darker than an unfiltered Twitter feed. Brace yourself, because we've got more fire hazards in our pocket than a Firefly convention. So go ahead, take a moment to dim those lights, flick on a fan, and snuggle into your blankets. If you're lucky, your candle holds more wax than woe, unlike our colonial friends whose evening glow is as consistent as a squirrel trying to cross the street during rush hour. Now, let's think some critical thoughts about life in the early 1700s. Have you ever wondered how many people it takes to light a single candle? Or why people in this period seemed to delight in flinging their rations at the wall in the name of decorative art? And most importantly, did they have mood lighting for candlelit dinners? Or was it more of a, you'll eat what I put in front of you and it's probably burnt sort of affair? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1725, a time when your evening ambience is less romantic dinner and more, surprise, it's dark. Picture yourself nestled in a cozy cabin, surrounded by your family. A single candle flickers heroically against the creeping shadows of the room, battling bravely in a war against the gloom that feels like it is declared full-time after 5 p.m. The candlelight wavers like an indecisive disco ball, casting strange shadows that make your little siblings look like eerie ghosts practicing for their next performance in the frightful Not Another Haunted House series. The flame crackles while it takes a break from lighting your world to remind you of all your life choices leading to this moment. A belly full of cornbread and a side of anxiety about the impending darkness. Colonial lighting is a reliable companion. A quintessential figure, that candle represents the spirited optimism, or sheer miscalculation, of your family's budget. In fact, that solitary candle is probably a bit too proud. It definitely costs as much as an inappropriate amount of your family's fine frocks. The pungent smell of tallow wafts through the air, reminding everyone that this waxy companion is decidedly less glamorous than it sounds. Each flicker illustrates a poignant lesson. It's not just a source of light. It might just be an entire lifestyle choice. If your candles were drunk on the hopes of becoming a fine chandelier, this is their sad afternoon at the local tavern. It's time to talk about seating arrangements, which can only be described by the phrase personal invasion. You're crammed into a seat beside your siblings, all of you squinting at the glowing wick, which flickers dramatically, as if trying to win an Oscar for Best Candle Performance. The wooden furniture strains to accommodate your shifting bodies, and one bad joke about Grandma's infamous stew sends someone teetering dangerously close to a fire hazard of child shouting moment. The moment that candlelight shines on dinner, you welcome it like an old friend. But the food looks even less lovable. Yes, your bustling kitchen today is the center of creativity and far from ideal rations. Boiled cabbage, an adventurous rabbit stew, and just enough flour to remind you that bread doesn't slice itself. In this dim light, anything remotely resembling sustenance glows with an ethereal charm, like they're more art pieces than meals. While food is being distributed, you'll likely hear complaints about shadows whispering conspiracies. Why is there a spider on the bread? Do you see that creep behind the barrel? The candle is both your source of sustenance and your worst enemy, as the tiniest hint of light dramatizes the absurdity of your evening. But let's not forget about the bane of your existence, the constant fight against the candle's manufacturer, namely, the incessant draft that sneaks in like a character actor hoping for attention. Is the door cracked again? Or does your neighbor's goat just have an amazing talent for opening doors? Perhaps this idiot goat is its own nightlife entertainment. You shiver at the thought, contemplating whether the candle will burn bright and hot enough to deter swamp creatures lurking just outside. As the evening rolls on, that flickering flame faces its ultimate dilemma. Burn bright and risk the judgment of your entire family, or burn low and strengthen the bones of tightly knit unity during this facepalm of a meal. You look at your family, who are trying really hard to enjoy medieval gourmet, and you wonder, is there such a thing as a humble pie for dessert? One bite into dinner confirms, nah, that pie is definitely still frozen. As that candle winks knowingly, a whisper of heat dances along your cheeks, melting away the evening chill.
You lean in closer. After all, warmth resides in dreadful choices and awkward family dinners. Could it be that this flame, not unlike a sitcom, makes everything feel a bit too warm and too familiar, just for you to laugh at it later? As you settle deeper into your blankets and allow your eyelids to drift heavy, just know that it was always going to be this way amidst candlelight chaos and a too quiet echo of burnt offerings. Every flicker of that flame guaranteed just enough laughter and love to once again witness the absurdity of life in colonial America. Good night, oh courageous candle warriors. Sleep tight, and may your dreams illuminate adventures far greater than a single flickering flame.
As we settle into the quiet end of our journey through colonial America, take a slow breath and let the images of this world drift gently through your mind. Tonight, we walked alongside people who began every morning with cold floors, smoky air, aching muscles, and porridge that tasted more like obligation than cuisine. We watched them wrestle with frozen hearths, sagging straw beds, bucket brigades, questionable stews, and clothing that scratched so fiercely it could start its own rebellion. And somehow, despite the discomfort, despite the chaos, they kept going, often laughing at the absurdity of it all. Their days were shaped by struggle, yes, but also by remarkable endurance. These were people who found warmth in community when the fire wouldn't catch, who built lives out of mud, smoke, and stubborn hope, who faced hunger, cold, sickness, and endless chores with a resilience we can still feel echoing across centuries. Their hardships were real, and so were the small joys: a fire finally sparking to life, a rare, warm bowl of food, a quiet moment before dawn. It wasn't glamorous, but it was human, beautifully, hilariously, painfully human. As you lie here now, wrapped in blankets far softer than anything they ever knew, remember how fortunate we are. We wake in warm rooms, we drink clean water, we cook with the press of a button, we bathe, we rest, we choose comfort without thinking twice. Their daily struggle is a reminder to be grateful for every simple gift that surrounds you tonight. So let your breath slow, let your muscles soften. Let the last thoughts of colonial America fade like smoke rising from an old hearth. You've traveled far enough for now. Rest gently, friend. May warmth find you easily, and may sleep come quietly to carry you into peace.